Phil, mate, it's that bit at the start where we need to do an intro.
Wait, what?
That bit at the start of the show where we do an intro. You know, that bit where I say, hello, my name's Dan, and this is the Lookout Sir 40k podcast, and you're Phil.
I am Phil, yeah.
Yeah, this is the start, mate. Start of the show, the intro. Trying something different, I guess. Maybe.
Not like a cold open, as they say.
Yeah, sort of going for something a bit different this time. I'm not sure if it works nearly as well. What do you reckon?
If you insert the music now, might be perfect.
So you think what I should do is now do the music after this bit?
That's what cold open is.
All right, okay. Let's do that then. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 81 of the Lookout Sir Warhammer 40,000 podcast. My name is Dan, and it's that bit at the start where I introduce my good buddy, Phil. How is it going, Phil?
Good. You just stopped me from having a bit of my tea, because I was like, oh no, he's talking to me already. I said, put it back down.
Put it back down. It's too rapid. That bit at the start there where we tried to do something different didn't really kind of work, did it? But in a way, at least it was an interesting experiment.
Yeah, I guess. We'll have to see.
People might like the cold open. They might be a bit like, that's something that we'd like to see more and more of in the future.
Yeah, I think it works better when it's probably something witty.
Do you think so, rather than us sort of just forcing it?
Possibly.
Did it feel forced, though? I don't know. I just thought maybe it'd be nice to try something different.
Might be. I mean, in terms of...
Okay. I love how non-committal you are to this whole process. Just like, I don't know, Dan, can we just get on with it? I don't really even want to be here. Come on now.
So it's late. I want to go to bed.
I want to go to bed. Shut up and get on with it. What are we talking about, Phil? What's this show about?
Well, this time we're doing something a bit different. We are having a discussion between Dan and I about
Oh my God, how different.
I know, exactly. I mean, we don't have a special guest on. We don't have a book to read. It's as they say, a classic filler episode, which is just a normal episode, really. Just me and Dan talking about stratagems, what we think about them, whether we like them, whether we don't like them, what we think could be better about them.
Exactly.
And as always, we have opinions.
Some different from each other, but also sort of aligned in a weird way. It's just a broad overview of the stratagem system. I mean, it's been a time now, hasn't it, since it came into existence, and we just figured it'd be fun to talk about what we think about it. So that's what we do, amongst a bunch of other topics that we diverge into at different points. But before we get to that, we have, of course, a 5-star review.
Peter!
Oh, hello, Dad.
What are you doing in here, son?
Oh,
What have I told you about wasting your time with these little plastic figurines?
It's not a waste of time, I like it.
How dare you talk back to me, Peter? It's about time you grew up.
I don't want to grow up. Oh, man, maybe there's something on the radio. Yeah, this is nicer.
Peter!
What's that?
That's right, it's me, the ghost of a award-winning TV and radio presenter, Jeremy Beadle.
Jeremy Beadle?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Now let me tell you here, Sonny, my dad was always telling me to grow up, and I never did. And look how successful I was. So ignore him, Peter, and keep playing with that little plastic crack. And while you're at it, listen to the Lookout Sir podcast, which right now is time for the 5-star review.
Wow, thanks, Jeremy.
Who are you talking to with there, son?
Jeremy Beadle.
What? No!
This week's 5-star review comes from Apple Podcasts of Great Britain. Oh, Great Britain, Phil. Imagine if I was to suggest that we do well in the Britons and we normally get reviews from there. Wouldn't that be unique and different?
I know. Apparently, don't we do well in Argentina, but we don't get no reviews from them. So come on, step it up, Argentinians. Leave us some reviews.
We were the number one gaming podcast in Argentina last week.
Is that because we were the only gaming podcast?
No. There were plenty of other, gaming podcasts going on in Argentina, but somehow we were number one. We were number one as well, Phil, in Finland the other day.
Ooh.
You know, the funny thing about Finland is I always remember Finland pronounced by Patrick Starr in an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants when he's hit on the head by a bowling ball thrown at him by Doodle Bob, which is a drawing of SpongeBob drawn by SpongeBob with a magical pencil that is brought to life and turns angry.
Interesting.
Indeed. And Patrick yells after being struck upon the head with a bowling ball, Finland! In that kind of way.
Okay. Bit like Scotland.
Yeah, a bit like Scotland for Braveheart.
Yeah.
I assume that was a Braveheart reference.
Vaguely.
Well, was it something else? Or is that just how you say Scotland?
That's like Scotland.
Scotland!
That's how you say it, isn't it?
That's how you say it. Fair enough. I you know, it's so rare that I say Scotland. Oh, there it is. Didn't even realise. Anyway, this week's 5-star review comes from Duffer 5550 or 5550 or 5550. Whatever you want to say, Duffer has you covered with 5550. And Duffer 5550 has said top 40k chat 5 stars because it's the 5-star review segment, Phil, and it's kind of a prerequisite that it requires a 5-star review. So, been a long old lockdown, hasn't it? Just, I mean, no longer than for us than anyone else. How are you finding it, by the way, Phil? The lockdown going well?
Yeah, it's not bad. It's just become part of life now. Don't want it to go back to whatever normal was.
I don't want to go outside again. Were you not down Primark the other day?
I may well have been.
Were you queuing up for 4 hours to get into Primark?
I know. No, I wasn't. I mean, but given the choice, would you be queuing up outside Games Workshop?
No.
Not even for those coins and those free minis you might get. Maybe if you purchase something, I'm not still sure if you have to buy anything or not.
I'm not buying into their weird cryptocurrency of extra new coins. What is that? What's that thing called where they sell something that's worthless but digital? Like the guy from Twitter sold his first tweet or something for like $2 million.
Oh, right. Oh, I've not heard of it.
It's something or other tokens. Like they're basically like digital things that you don't really own, but you do.
Oh.
It's very weird.
Okay.
Anyway, so worldly are we. Anyway, it's been a long lockdown or a long old lockdown, and finding this podcast has made the commute to work every day a bit more enjoyable. Keep it up, boys. That is a lovely review. And obviously, you know, Duffer 5550 has obviously had the privilege of continuing to travel to work every day while the rest of us have been locked up in our homes. So we can only assume that Duffer 5550 is doing something of value. And as such, obviously, we appreciate that. And we appreciate your 5-star review. And we say thank you, but not just me, of course, Phil.
It is I. Yes, me again. Thanks very much. We really appreciate it. Keeping the economy going via your commuting of whatever form that may take. I have to note, we seem to have a lot of commuters. We seem to have got the UK podcasting commuter group. We've got them.
Audience, yeah.
We've got that audience. We always seem to have commuters, but good on you. I hope you're enjoying that commute. You know, I hope this podcast is going to be long enough to satiate your, 2-hour long, 3-hour long commute that you might have in both directions. We got you covered.
There's plenty of back catalogue in there, right? Should it not satisfy? There's plenty to get back into.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder sometimes if people miss those 6-hour podcasts that we used to do. Instead, we now have a streamlined 2 to 3 hour podcast instead,
or 3.5, sometimes 4-hour podcasts.
I know, but those 6-hour ones, what a joy!
They were a joy, to be honest. I mean, to be fair though, that was only by virtue of the fact that we recorded twice, or rather, we did 2 recording sessions, and then we just put out whatever we recorded. And often we'd just do 2 3-hour recording sessions and just put it out on the internet. Whereas now we do 2 3-hour long podcast recording sessions, but they happen sequentially.
Yeah, we're just doing a little bit more of an intro and outro. Although I think we do them more often, but we shorten them down, so it probably ends up being the exact same thing.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And I think in a way it's probably better this way, right? Because it's more frequent, availability, which is never bad. But yeah, we do attract the commuters, which is fair enough because, what else are you going to do when you sat in a car? Obviously, concentrating on the road and ensuring that you're upholding the highway code and maintaining, safe driving standards. But other than that, what are you going to do, eh?
Exactly. Just listen to us. Maybe everyone who commutes should leave their name in the comments, and then every episode we just shout someone random as if we've got a third presenter, and we shout your name so you feel included, like you're in the conversation.
Yeah.
So we'd be like, "Oh, how did you feel about that, Ben? Oh, you liked it, did you? Oh, that was good. Nice one, Ben.
Indeed.
Cool. Safe driving.
Tell us. Yeah, safe driving, Ben. Ben, you're falling asleep at the wheel.
Exactly.
Calm down. But anyway, there we go. Wouldn't it be strange as well if by some random happenstance we exactly guessed Duffer 5550's name as being Ben?
I know, I'd love it. That'd be very cool.
Exactly. Maybe Duffer 5550 should follow up with another 5-star review saying, my name is not Ben.
Exactly. And obviously to do that, you've just got to create a brand new account, leave another 5-star review. It's no problem.
Or maybe he could amend this review to just read, my name is not Ben. And anyone who comes across it be like, why is that a 5-star review? Even better. Anyway, there you go, guys. That was our 5-star review segment. If you would like to be called out by us over the interwebs via this gorgeous, not at all, done disingenuously segment to drive positive, feedback from our listeners, all you need to do is leave a review out there on the interwebs, either on our Facebook page or on iTunes or anywhere else,
or UK Apple Podcasts, where you must be a commuter.
Exactly.
Commuters
anyway, we'll get on now to the rest of the show, talking about stratagems. Transitional noise. Woo! That was a weak transitional noise.
That seemed all right.
All right, all in this part of the podcast, myself and Phil have taken it upon ourselves to discuss the controversial and or core gameplay mechanic of Warhammer 40,000 9th edition and 8th edition previously, that being the illustrious Stratagem. Ooh. You excited about this, Phil?
Stratagems? What are they? What do they do?
What are they?
What's
all that? Well, I mean, again, right, the Stratagem is a really interesting thing, and I felt like it was a good topic for conversation because now, what is it, 4 years since 8th edition? Was it like 2017, around like April, May 2017, we got introduced to the concept of 8th at least?
I think it's about 3.5 because they do like a 3-year cycle, and we're just under. Maybe it's close to 4 though, because it's.
I feel like it was 2017 it came out though, right? Or was it 2018?
That's maths.
No, it was 2017.
Probably, yeah. I think this year will be the 4th year since, if that makes sense.
Whatever the case, it has been a while now since the Stratagem has existed. It's gone through many forms, from its initial kind of teased existence through to the kind of initial base set of 3, and then expanded with the initial releases of codexes, then supplemented with the future releases of supplements and or campaign books, and then expanded upon even more in the books of 9th edition. I think it's fair to say we've seen a lot of transformation within stratagems over the course of 8th and then going into 9th. And it just seemed like something that was good to talk about because on the whole, I think it's broadly asserted that people like the stratagem system, right? Because the stratagem system was a core mechanic of 8th edition, and 8th edition is the most popular 40k has ever been. Thus, it stands to reason that the stratagem must be good, right, Phil?
I think so. Broadly speaking, I think so. Although I'm expecting you to have a counterpoint to this, and you're going to.
No. I appreciate I was kind of voicing that in a way that would allude to the notion that I don't agree with that statement. But I think it's a reasonable assertion. I think that here is my overarching feeling on the stratagem throughout the course of 40k 8th edition is I think it was a promising and interesting system that definitely allowed the game designers to express more creative elements. The resource management partnered with, these kind of extraordinary skills that you were able to gain access to, these twists of fate, if you will, that you were able to influence with your, cunning and commanding guile. But as time has come on, I feel like it has become a bit too much of a crutch. And I do feel like as the system has developed, it has definitely become probably more representative of the core gameplay design than I feel like it may have been originally intended. I think originally the stratagem was a bit of flavor, a bit of seasoning on top of the game system. Whereas I feel like with 9th edition now, the stratagem really has become the core attributes of a codex. The thing that really defines and differentiates codexes is their lists of stratagems. And I do think we're in a bit of a period of inequality in the world of stratagems, because at this moment in time, there are definitely armies out there that don't benefit from the same breadth and selections of stratagems as others. And I do think that also has an impact on the game. So I think, again, in the broad sense, stratagems are interesting to me because I think early on, GW didn't really know what should be a stratagem and what should be a special rule. And then as time has gone on, I think they've done a better job of refining what they feel like a stratagem should be or shouldn't be. But we're in that weird middle ground where some things haven't caught up to that design philosophy yet. So we have armies like the Guard, for example, or the Chaos Space Marines that came out very early in 8th edition that now are at a disadvantage, even more so than normal, because of their relative lack of exciting or creative stratagems. And that's an interesting thing. That's something that we've never really seen before in the evolution of 40k. Because normally in the evolution of 40k, an old codex could still have some tricks or some, potential options. But with the stratagem system, lacking stratagems is a massive problem for armies, more so than any of the, codex creep issues that we've seen before. So accepting I threw out a lot of words there, Phil. I mean, what's your vibe?
Yeah, well, there's a few things to say. One of them was there was a really interesting article in White Dwarf. I can't remember the issue. I think it was maybe 1 or 2 months ago. And they talked about this very topic of when do rules belong in a datasheet versus a stratagem versus like a core mechanic or a rule book. And it was, I think, Robin Cruddis, I think his name is, I think he's the lead designer.
Crudders.
He does quite often these Warhammer 40k articles, which tend to be the most interesting thing out of White Dwarf, I find, because it's a peek behind the curtain to see whether it is a floaty beard or not, or it's something else. For listeners, that is a reference to a previous episode.
I think you robbed the reference of its gravitas when you still, acknowledge its origin.
Well,
you're supposed to let it be a thing that, those who know.
Oh, fair enough. It is I've a floaty beard. So yeah, they're basically there because the stratagem is meant to be like a really cinematic moment, and the way they defined it between whether it's a core mechanic or it's a datasheet entry. So if you look at a unit, when that thing is doing an action, and I don't mean that in terms of actions, just doing something, does it deserve to be a cool rule that sits on its datasheet? So let's look at, I can't remember what it was called, but it was effectively the Hammer of Wrath for Inceptors, where they would jump down, they would do some mortal wounds on a 6 in 8th edition, and that was built into their datasheet as a thing that they could do because they're kind of landing next to their opponent, doing some damage to them. That was something that existed then, and then in 9th edition, I discovered in one of my early games that it was no longer on the datasheet and had moved to a stratagem. And their logic behind when it belongs on a datasheet is if it's something you're expected to do every single game, it will be on the datasheet. If it's something that you will do less than once per game, it belongs in a stratagem. So it's something cool that you will do sometimes, it's a stratagem. If it's something cool that your unit should be doing every game, then it really belongs on the datasheet. And then they refined it a bit further by saying if it's something that multiple units do, then it belongs in at the codex level, which is effectively a universal special rule. So, Angels of Death rule, for example, or They Shall Know No Fear. Those are now army-wide rules that are taken out of the datasheet. And then they talked about other things like, flyers have some of their rules in the core rulebook, but then a lot of the things like the hover and supersonic still exist on the datasheet, even though they are used by most aircraft. So I thought that was interesting in terms of where it sits. So if it's something super thematic, it really belongs as a stratagem. The other point you made is like the evolution of stratagems. So I think early doors in 8th edition, there was a bit of a handicap. So everyone had access to stratagems. Some armies had really good stratagems, but they tended to be the armies that couldn't easily get a battalion. So I liked the tax involved in creating your army that limited your CP. So it's like Custodes, fantastic set of stratagems, but they had 6 CPs. Guard had tons of CP, but all their stratagems were crap, which was a bit of an imbalance, but it sort of did balance out overall. It's like, great, I'm just going to spend mine as a guard player on loads of rerolls and stuff like that, because that's all we had. Defensive gunners and Overwatch, although Overwatch didn't cost CP back in 8th edition. And now they flip that on its head, because now everyone starts off with the same amount of CPs, which is normally about 12 at the very beginning. So that's more balanced, but then you get this imbalance of those armies that were very CP intensive are suddenly so much better now because their suite of stratagems were really good. And as you say, I think some armies are lacking behind. I think Psychic Awakenings has done a small amount to address that by giving every armies a better access to decent stratagems. But even then, I think some armies are better than others in that respect.
I think Psychic Awakening was a really interesting element, because I think what Psychic Awakening did was obviously as good a job as it could do in terms of leveling the playing field. But, at its core, Psychic Awakening, though, it's stated that it was intended to be some amplification that will take these armies into 9th edition, it is still at its core an 8th edition rule set. And in that respect, it definitely doesn't satisfy all of the expected criteria within what we're now seeing within the armies of 9th edition. And I think what's interesting about that is that it's a very cumbersome rule set at the moment with, the Psychic Awakening and the vast array of locations where you can source stratagems. I most refer to Chaos Space Marines when I talk about this, because Chaos Space Marines have the unique scenario of having had a book that was released at the start of 8th edition, a revamped version of the book that released midway through 8th edition, which was made up of content that could be found within the pages of Vigilus Defiance or Vigilus...
Ablaze.
Ablaze, that was the one.
Yeah.
And then they added in all of the extra flavor with the Psychic Awakenings as well. So, in those instances, it starts to become very cumbersome, and you're starting to see that trickle through with armies like Admech at the moment, for example, though obviously getting a new codex soon. They're in a really weird state at the moment, because they've not only got, data sheets that come from different game systems, like, units that were released for Kill Team that are now available in, regular 40k, to stuff being added in Psychic Awakenings, to things being referenced in Vigilus. But now they've also got extra stuff in Book of Rust, right? So like
Mm.
again, it starts to become a bit of a weird one, right? And it feels to me more and more like we're getting back to the war gear card system of old. Do you remember in second edition there were all of these war gear cards that they used to release in White Dwarf, and obviously came in the core rule box set?
Vortex grenades. Ah.
Vortex grenades, graviton guns, which were one of the most hilarious weapons in second edition, because all you had to do was hit the thing and then you put it in a gravitational stasis field and it just floated out of existence. So even if it was like a toughness a million double R demon prince with wings and all sorts of other MacGuffins, you just walk up to it and go, ah, yes, but gravity. And it'd be like, oh, no. But anyway, yeah, so it's one of those, right? Because what's really interesting to me now is the breadth of locations and places where you source these stratagems from. You know, okay, fair enough, when they revamp and re-release these codexes, it's definitely becoming more streamlined. But it does feel like, even in its streamlined form, this system, this stratagem system, is expanding to a place where it will become impossible. In fact, it has become impossible for you as a single player to adequately understand and intimately know every stratagem in the game. It's not possible now. And what's interesting about that to me is twofold. One is about the intent of the stratagem system in terms of its relationship within the game and how that needs to be played out between players, but also the areas of ambiguity and the relative kind of opportunities for mistakes to occur. Because as we know, whether maliciously or accidentally, people make mistakes consistently when playing 40k, because the amount of rules and the similarities between those rules is really abundant. And I feel like the way the stratagem system goes at the moment, it almost is encouraging us to make more and more mistakes, or conversely, adding extra, nuance and laboriousness to the game in some respects, because what we're effectively having to deal with now is a lot of, well, hang on a second, what's that? Like lots of moments of questioning and general kind of confusion, because I guarantee when you go up to the tabletop in a tournament setting and you're playing against, I don't know, someone who is using the House Raven traits from the recently released Book of Rust, it's probably likely that you've never seen those before. And it's probably likely that you're going to be going, hang on a second here, really? In varying instances. And yeah, that whole interaction is interesting to me, because it feels like Games Workshop was trying to streamline things, but yet it keeps layering stuff on to the point that it's like, wow, it is starting to get quite cumbersome. But I don't know. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, I sort of get it. There's rules there's stratagems in lots of different places across different books. Also, I guess it's interesting, like the evolution of a stratagem. Like, as you said, the initial 3 stratagems at the beginning of 8th edition, everyone had indexes. And to me, that was almost like the glory days of 8th edition, where it was nice and simple. You had some, stratagems were really interesting because you only had so few of them. And then they've gone, well, actually, this is great. We can add more and more onto them. And that they've sort of evolved over the years. So what was interesting with Psychic Awakening is they were used as a sort of resource management for upgrades, like pre-game, quite often. So the new ones are like, you can turn your captain into a chapter master. That will cost you some CP. And then in the White Dwarf article, they talk about that specifically as something they've changed now, because it's pre-game. They want to take it away from that, so it now just costs more points. So you still sort of start the game with your kind of 12 CPs to start off with, rather than 8 or however many it might cost you, which is odd because that actually is counterintuitive to how they've done the Forge World books, where you want certain relic vehicles, you still have a pre-game CP tax, which doesn't make sense based on the intent of what they've said for 9th edition, how they want to use stratagems. I sort of get it though, because it is still like, oh, this is to replicate that it's something old. So that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of the relic vehicles, I do understand it because there are some obvious benefits to certain relic vehicles, specifically like the Leviathan Dreadnoughts and some of the more kind of egregious vehicles that are available. But it is interesting. And I think the thing that's most interesting to me about stratagems now is the general etiquette around them is something that intrigues me, because historically I would have always asserted that there's a sort of gentleman's agreement on the tabletop that we as players should make an effort to acknowledge our options, i.e., if a unit is going to arrive within 12 inches of a Space Marine infantry unit, it is only polite under the established thinking that you remind your opponent of the threat of Auspex scans, because no one likes getting caught out, and putting down a unit within 12 resulting in them taking a free round of shooting in exchange for 2 CP can feel really powerful if done correctly. So again, historically, it was not an expectation, but a desire for your opponent to be a little bit more assisting and helpful with that information. Whereas now, I'm kind of getting to the point where I feel like the stratagem system must be intended to be a gotcha system, because if it wasn't, they wouldn't be doing as many of these as they are currently, and so many of these that respond to such exact scenarios, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how many stratagems in an army that really are kind of those gotcha stratagems, because not all stratagems are like that. A lot of stratagems are passive, where, okay, you're shooting at me, I'm gonna, do transhuman on the Space Marines. You don't really need to forewarn your opponent when they're electing to shoot at my Space Marine squad to be like, just so you know, I can put transhuman on them. Do you want to do a different target? It's sort of agreed that that's not really needed. It's for ones where it's really going to muck up someone's game plan, where I mean, even something like Vect, for example, was a very classic one. Yeah, I mean, there are some that are real gotcha ones, and the one you're talking about, like Auspex Scan, that's another one. But they do create these really kind of key, I'm going to say it again, like cinematic moments, but by telling your opponent about them, you give them a fair chance to elect out of that cinematic moment. So therefore, you never have it, because they might just rely on a different tactic or a different method. It's like, I want to put these guys down here to shoot at this one thing. Oh, you might Auspex scan them with this unit because you've told me about it. Thanks for the reminder. Oh, I'll put them over this side and do something else, which isn't ideal, but you've kind of, you've countered me by having this option available to you, and you've not even had to use it to stop me from doing the thing that I wanted in an ideal situation. And in a way, that can make for a more boring game. I mean, it makes for one that's more fair in a kind of gentleman's game, especially when it comes to like a tournament setting. Maybe that is, I don't know, in a friendly game, you could argue that's the correct format to do. In a tournament game, you could say, well, the gloves are off. If you forget, it's your fault, which I know is sort of one person's logic, but the other version is just to tell them anyway, just to be polite. But it's weird. It's like these stratagems exist and they almost do the job that they need to do without ever having to use them, because your opponent might just opt to not do the thing in case you play a stratagem on it.
And I have to be honest, right? And I think that interaction and that sequence of events is where the stratagem system becomes most bizarre, because my expectation is that there needs to be some work done within the game to further accommodate the stratagem rollout. To me, at the moment, the stratagem feels like 4th edition psychic phase or 5th edition psychic phase, which is there isn't one, but it's integrated into every sequence of the game. This psychic power triggers in your movement phase. This psychic power triggers in the shooting phase, so on and so forth. And in a way, that's where the stratagems are at the moment. But where I feel like that becomes cumbersome is because that's where those weird interactions occur, where you then start to express the ability to do certain things in response to certain scenarios. And it does become like a mind games scenario, but it also becomes a weird interaction because technically, in order to play stratagems efficiently and correctly, there needs to be an established sequence of events that you and your opponent agree to, whereby I say to you, Phil, I am declaring this unit is shooting at this unit. These guns are firing at this. And then I need to essentially offer you in every instance an ample amount of time to consider and respond. Because if I don't do that, you then could be like, oh, well, actually, sorry, yeah, you just started rolling for it. I want to do this to this squad. And then at that point, the guy rolling the dice could be like, oh, well, I might have changed my mind if you told me that. Well, it's like, but how does that work, right? That's not fair. Like, I should be able to do the thing, and then I should be able to gain the benefits of it. You chose a target. You weren't to know I was going to do it, but you should have given me the opportunity. But then you do this weird rollback thing where the guy goes, well, in that case, I'll shoot at that unit because I can guarantee getting that unit. And it's like, right, okay, but... And again, you sort of accept that for what it is, but the sequence isn't stable enough to accommodate that. Again, I always go back to like TCG systems, specifically Magic the Gathering, because Magic the Gathering has a very... I mean, to call it sophisticated is possibly doing it a massive, amount more than maybe it deserves in some instances, but it's certainly much more sophisticated than what resides in 40k at the moment, and that's the stack system. But that's also the way that they break down the sequence of interactions. Certain things can only be done in the main phase. Certain things can only happen in the combat phases. Certain cards can trigger at any moment, but to resolve the interactions between those cards, they introduce the concept of the stack, which essentially takes into consideration the order of events that has transpired and when those players have introduced those ideas, and ultimately how that then stacks against each other. And that then gives you your resolution. And I think that's what's interesting about 40k stratagems at the moment is there's a lot of ambiguity, and there's a lot of moments in 40k 9th edition and 8th edition where retrospective conversations are occurring mid dice rolls going, oh, wait, sorry, mate, I forgot I need to, like you might see how many hits have occurred. And then you might be like, oh, sorry, yeah, I should have said this earlier, transhuman. And the guy's like, right, okay, cool. Are you just doing that because I rolled really well with my hit dice? Or are you actually genuinely forgetting? And again, it's the complexes of it that frustrate me, because I feel like there needs to be something to clean this up and make it better.
They do have that in Warhammer Underworlds, because that is a model system with cards, and they have if you're going to do an action, there's always an option to play a reaction card, and you kind of do have to go, I'm playing this, do you want to do anything? They say no, you go, cool, I'm now doing this next thing. It is like an interrupt of sorts. And it's weird because in those games it is a bit more chess-like in terms of I've done this move, there is no taking backs, which in 40k has always been a thing that you can do in that kind of gentleman's game of you do something and then later on you forget something, or you go, I want to change my mind. Do you mind if I just move this model back somewhere? You normally kind of agree, yeah, that's fine. Or if your opponent says no, you go, okay, cool. That goes both ways, and I know that's how the game we're going to have. And sometimes it's almost better to penalize yourself and be like, oh, I made that mistake. I'm not going to ask to change it retrospectively because that's my job to learn. So yeah, but potentially that does change those little wiggles around stratagems. I think often because the game does go on for a long time, on average 2 hours plus, and you want to speed it up as much as possible. So quite often I'll be like, right, I've rolled my hit rolls, I'm picking them up, I'm rolling my wound rolls, and I'm doing all this stuff, and you're trying to get through it as quick as possible. If you had to stop at every stage and be like, is there a stratagem you want to use? Is there a stratagem you want to use? It would just get really boring, and it will like double the length of the game. It's sort of on the onus of the other person to sort of go, oi mate, hold on, give me a minute to think about whether I want to use a stratagem or not at this stage. Even if it is just to interrupt, say, can I have a minute to think about it? I think that's the way to go. I mean, you could be really hard and fast and really strict and enforce some kind of fixed order. I mean, it might be better to, because the stratagems, the way they're activated, right, they're all at different times. So you have some that happen at the beginning of the shooting phase, where you've got to declare something that doesn't resolve until you actually shoot with that unit much later on. Sometimes you'll do it in a previous phase, but it still really only affects that unit in the shooting phase, for example. And then it's like when you declare a target, there's another time to use a stratagem then, and then it might be based on your hits or wound rolls or something later on. So there's lots of different points within a phase when you can use a stratagem, or when your opponent can use a stratagem as well. And they could clean that up, I guess, in terms of having a distinct thing like at the beginning of every phase, that's just when you use your stratagems, or when you select a unit to do something, that is the only time you use a stratagem. So at least then you could either get your stratagems out of the way at the beginning of the phase, which sometimes isn't ideal because you've got to then remember what stratagems have affected what units, a bit like then. But then that's how orders work currently, which I still don't think is the ideal method. But you've got to declare all of your orders up front before you even start shooting. Whereas I think it's much better to go, I'm issuing an order on this unit, I act out what that unit's doing straight away. And then I can do some other stuff. And then if I want to issue another order, I can do it down the line. And, same with stratagems, you play it as that unit's about to do something. So it maybe limits, or at least allows the opponent to know when they need to do something to do a counter.
Yeah, I think for me, like, I would love to see. I genuinely think 40k should do away with 90% of its reactive stratagems. Fair enough, command reroll. Although again, command reroll and I do not get along as a concept. I don't like it. I've never liked it because I think it's too much of a surefire thing, and I don't like that in 40k.
It's a good ground. Well, on one hand, I like it, but it is a crutch, and it's like it takes the randomness out of the game. So at least I like how in 9th edition they've limited it to certain rolls, like to hit, to wound, damage. Like you can't now re-roll the explodes roll on tanks because it happens so far and few often times. And when it did happen, someone would just re-roll it, so then it wouldn't happen. So those interesting cinematic moments that are meant to be happening in the game just don't ever happen because the re-roll removes that choice from actually occurring.
Yeah. And I think, again, I think they've done a good job of refining it versus its 8th edition form. But even then, I'm still not sold on it overall. I think, personally, the only of the 3 kind of initial core stratagems that I would keep is the interrupt. Although even then, that unlocks a wider conversation about my feelings on the combat system, which is a thing all towards itself, because as regular listeners know. But I think this is the thing. For me, I would remove 90% of the reactive stratagems, and I would introduce not only the command phase, but a command end phase. And I would essentially align stratagems to the command phase and then to the end command phase with very limited quantities of them being reactive. And I would effectively be like, cool, in the command phase, this unit has this ability which boosts their shooting. This unit has this ability that does this. This unit has this, right? Like you would basically in your command phase, you would allocate all your command abilities. Dreadnoughts give you a lieutenant buff. That unit's going to be shooting twice. Like you'll declare that all in the command phase. And then in the subsequent shooting phase and movement phases and all that stuff, you can play out those stratagems in your turn. And then at the end of your turn, you then have the opportunity to put on your defensive stratagems for the upcoming turn. So you go, cool, that unit has transhuman physiology. This unit is on all spec scans. So it has an area of effect where you're essentially laying out to your opponent, I've spent the CP, now this unit is alert and ready for people to come from reserves. And it's a tactical decision you've made as a general because you know to expect reserves, because you know your opponent has reserves. So you know that you are doing that in a calculated way and choosing a unit that's in a tactical location. And then you have an interaction between you and your opponent that's meaningful, as opposed to just, gotcha. And also it just makes the whole thing feel a little bit better to me. I think the problem is with the stratagem system at the moment is it's just a thing they threw on top as opposed to something that is core to the game, which is why I compare it to the psychic system of old. It's just an extra thing that got added in. Whereas I feel like to really realize its potential, it needs to be woven into everything more sophisticatedly than what we have currently. But that's my take on it. I don't know.
I mean, I think if you were to tie it to the command phase, which is quite similar to what they do in Age of Sigmar, where every unit has a kind of command ability that it can pull off. Although I think they also have stratagems on top of it as well. But I mean, if you tie it to the command phase, the downside of that is it makes it a lot more. You've got to really think ahead and know what you're doing. It's a lot more
I agree.
strategy and tactics, which on one hand, I mean, you could argue. That is a good thing, but at the same time, I think that really diminishes the casual player, and it's. I mean, that's fine for tournament setting, and there's a real skill involved with that. But I think that's almost like a bit of a step too far, if you know what I mean.
Do you think so? Do you not feel like it's something that kind of gives you more agency as a general and makes it feel more like a war game rather than,
the problem with it though is you could, well, I mean, people do this anyway, but if you go, I need to move this unit to here to make sure I'm in range to shoot this thing, and to do that I've got to do this stratagem beforehand, you're going to spend your whole command phase just measuring stuff out to be like, where can this squad move, what can it shoot at, and then is it even worth me doing this stratagem? Now, a lot of players, especially at tournaments, will do stuff like that anyway, where they're pre-measuring absolutely everything, which I kind of think is a bit boring, really. I get why people do it, and, you have to do it to an extent, but a lot of times it's a game of I've measured stuff out so you can't do stuff, which is a bit like what you were saying with I've got this stratagem and I don't even have to use it to stop you from doing something because I've pre-counted your counter, sort of thing.
But I think that's why if you had a system where everything's out on the table and everything is communicated through that system, okay, yeah, sure, there are pros and cons. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying that it spells it out to people. And I also think the funny thing is with it as well is it creates urgency within these actions. And I know when you say like, oh, it makes things take longer or it becomes boring, I'm not sure that's true, because what I tend to find is with people, when they do something and something goes extra well or extra bad, they're then going, oh, hang on, and stepping back out at the moment and needing to rethink things and going, right, okay, this didn't work out as I was planning. Oh, what do I do? Whereas, and then they start going, oh, I can put that stratagem. At least in this version of events, you're locked in. It's like, cool, I want to be able to put a different stratagem on that unit. It's like, sorry, mate.
It solves that problem of if you've forgotten it, you're stuck, and there are no takesy backsies.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. I like the idea that, and it also revolves a lot more bookkeeping. You're going to have cards for everything to put down next to those units or tokens or whatever, which is fine.
You do get cards already, though, right? I mean, it's. I regularly use the cards, so I don't.
I've never used stratagem cards, but then my stratagems for guard have always been rubbish.
Free.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you've got 20, but there's only 3 you use. And so I can remember that. Thanks. So, I don't know. I mean, I think the defensive ones is a different story where potentially all you're doing is you're spending CP. If you say, "Oh, I'm using Auspex to give myself a buff, an aura ability," your opponent can go, "Cool, I'm just going to go over here." And it is a bit like what you were saying. They might do that anyway if you tell them you have a stratagem, but it's cost you CP. But quite often it's like, oh, I've transhumaned this thing. Oh, do I? The person might not have ever even intended to have shot at that unit, in which case you've just spent CP when you really didn't have to because you're just being overly cautious. And I think that creates the bad feels of, oh, I've done stuff and I've just wasted all these CP on things. And it requires, I don't know, it requires a lot of forethought. It reminds me a lot of I'm trying to remember the name now, is the ad mech ability where like your protocols, and you would have to the turn before decide what protocol your army's going to be in for the next turn. Whether you're getting a buff to your shooting or your close combat or your defense, for example. And it's a bit like that, where you have to think whole turn ahead, which I almost prefer the immediacy of, I know I want to shoot this unit and I want to buff it up in a certain way. I want to apply that stratagem that I know I have then and now. I mean, to an extent, you might be right. At the beginning of a turn, I might have already decided, and I should have really decided what I'm going to do with that unit. But imagine if I was like, oh, I'm White Scar, so I can advance and shoot. And I put a CP on them at the beginning of the game, but I rolled a 1 for my advance roll, so therefore I'm now not in range to shoot. So I've wasted a shooting stratagem on that unit because I was doing a bit of a gamble. Whereas if you apply it on the shooting phase, you know whether you're in range or not.
But to me, I think that's better because I like that dynamic, because I think it's better for the game that you don't get everything you want all the time. You know what I mean? Like, it's more authentic. It's more the way it should be. And also, you know, because again, I get it, right? 40k is a game of heroes and warriors and blah, 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 blah. And, you know, these units are their own individuals with their own personalities. But I think, you know, as a 40k general, I do feel like you should be given more sense of command and of control of this army. So rather than it just be seeming like them making up their own minds or doing what they want to do for themselves, you're more integrated into this experience and you are fulfilling that role. You are playing the role of a general, as opposed to, you know, being a witness of this event, as it were. You're more actively in control of it. And again, I acknowledge that it's not a perfect system, but I don't think what we have currently is either. And that's really where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is the core stratagems that they added to 9th edition was mostly just to fix the well-known problems of 8th edition, such as like the bad feel mechanics of you've wrapped a unit so they can't fall back and they're stuck in combat. Or, oh, you've wrapped my tank and you're about to kill it and all the men inside have just died. And I mean, I'm sure there's a couple of others, but pretty much all of the core stratagems are sort of just a fix. It's a bit of a band-aid to fix those problems. And they were considered as like core tournament tactics for the game, and then get kind of Games Workshop's come out and been like, that's not how we want you to play it. You still can, and we're going to give people a way of getting out of it, but it's going to cost them some CP. And that could have just been a kind of a band-aid fix to something that, with a bit more rules writing, maybe they could have written out of the game or fixed in some other way. Or they go, well, actually, this is a great way of resolving these issues. You're stuck in combat, but you want to fall back. Great, let's just make it a stratagem, kind of nice and simple. What I've always liked the idea of, again, based on that early index edition, is I'd almost rather there be more generic stratagems that everyone has access to, just to do these kind of key interesting moments of the game. And I've said it a million times, and I hope Guard get it. I want the ability as a tank to fall back and shoot. Really simple. Sort of feels like everyone should have that, like just to do at least once per turn. But then, the counter argument is then, tagging tanks in combat is maybe not that useful. But I almost think it's one of those bad field mechanics that shouldn't really be in the game.
Yeah, I mean, there's a wider discussion there, which we'll have in the future, around my general feelings on the state of vehicles in 9th edition and where they're at currently. But again, we'll tease that as a future talking point, because I think vehicles specifically need a lot of love still in 9th edition, much in the same way as I said before about the issues of the assault phase in 8th edition and how they've taken steps to somewhat resolve that, but still have massive problems with it. I think the vehicles at the moment are really struggling. So, yeah, generic stratagems that would boost vehicles would be useful. I mean, again, I don't make any secret of my feelings towards 8th and 9th edition's core mechanics. I think it's a bad game system at its core, but I think it's layered up with all this extra stuff that makes it all right. But at its core, right, like 8th edition and 9th edition is vanilla Age of Sigmar at its core, right?
No.
And again,
Ooh.
but it is at its core, it's vanilla Age of Sigmar from
Well,
2014.
when the rule sets, the base rule sets were very similar between AOS 1 and 40k 8th edition. I mean, I would probably say they're quite divergent now, especially in terms of how the games just play out, in terms of like you can have 2 turns, a double turn in Age of Sigmar, stuff like that. So yeah, mechanically there are a lot of similarities. I think the streamlining of it in 8th was super popular. I think the stratagems is like a fun card game element. Although I would say, so I remember playing, like I really love Kill Team, but I really hate the stratagems in Kill Team. I find it actually really hard to remember the stratagems, and maybe it's because it's a game I kind of play sporadically. I don't play it enough to learn the stratagems like I would, but they're sort of all over the place. You've got kind of core army, you've got core generic stratagems, I believe. It's hard to remember. Pretty much generic stratagems. You've got your army specific faction stratagems, and then you also have your Kill Team specialist stratagem. So if you've got a gunner, or I think things like gunners, veterans, medics, grenadiers, all your different
snipers or marksmen.
All of those also have stratagems, and on top of that, you have levels of stratagems. So depending on how experienced you are, you unlock stratagems as you go. And in that game, I pretty much only ever use the really generic command point reroll, because that's the only one I could remember. Occasionally with my like heavy guy, I would remember I could either get, I think, +1 to hit or reroll your number of shots or something. Like I would only ever remember 1 or 2, because there were so many for your team, you could never remember them all, even if you had the cards laid out in front of you. And 40k suffers from that a bit, but I don't think as much. And I don't know if that's just because I've learned them more, because I've played so many more games, or because I've read them all and gone, well, I instantly know from my experience of playing 40k that these are all crap, so just ignore them. Like in my book of Astra Militarum Codex for 8th edition, I went through with sticky notes on every single one. I wrote what phase of the game I play that stratagem in. So, and I also sort of made a little note of these are the ones I actually want to play in a game, and there's like 3 or 4, and the rest I know it's like, well, there's a bunch to do with sentinels or basilisks. It's like, don't have those units, so just scrub them. I do have to say there's something about the layout even of the new book. So I was looking at the Space Marine Codex, like the layout of, they've kind of grouped them all together, but they're still a bit sort of nonsensical in terms of they haven't really done it by phases. They've sort of done there are still ones that are like pre-game, so they've kind of put them together. They've sort of defined things as like heroic moments, so like your heroes, ones that affect heroes sort of apply to one, ones that sort of affect units go in another group. But part of me is just like, just list them out by phase and just put them in there. But the reason why they don't do that is because some can apply multiple phases, especially the defensive ones. It's like, when you suffer mortal wounds, use this, but that could be any phase, right? Except movement, probably. So it's hard. You could potentially, if you could lock them into a specific phase, then you could do that. And just from an ease of use from using that book, you could just go, cool, I'm in this phase. These are the stratagems I need to look at right now, because there are so many, you can't really learn them all. I think people would say, well, if you play enough games, you would. But I think for an average player, it's really difficult to remember every single stratagem you've got at your disposal as you're playing a game. And which makes it hard, because quite often you'll end up forgetting, oh, if I only did that.
Yeah.
So,
but I think, and you raise a lot of really interesting points there, mate. I think the thing is with all of that is you're right. Like, I think they do need to add, clarifications around phases. Like, again, to use the Magic the Gathering example, you should just have simple terminology that expresses when this can be used. It can be instance, all phases, sorcery, movement, i.e. something that can only be used in your movement phase. Like, again, they've got an established keyword system for units. Just put it on the stratagem system as well. Just give us some keywords that relate to phases. And again, the keyword system is another system that I'd love to get into at some point in the future, because I've got some axes to grind on that thing as well. But
ooh, juicy,
mate. Honestly, I'm at my core, I'm
a
bitter old man.
Just so you know, there is a lead designer job for 40k. You're more than welcome to apply for it.
Oh God!
Or is it just more fun to ramble at me for an hour every week instead?
Yeah, I think that's really all I need out of life. But yeah, I mean, if there is a lead design job out there, I mean, I'm pretty confident I could do it. I just don't think they'd give it to me. I don't have the relevant experience.
This is your experience. This is your experience.
Yeah, I'll just send them this.
On your CV, just be like, look out to a podcast recorder.
Boom, done.
Exactly.
They'll be like, they're literally, they couldn't throw that CV in the bin faster. No. It's just, I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, look, I don't confess or pretend to be anything other than a passionate fan. I enjoy this game a lot. I've played it a lot, and I've played a lot of other game systems a lot, and I can see from what they're doing that they've got good ideas. They're just really poorly realized, and I think that's the problem with the stratagem system overall. To me, is it could be good if it was implemented better. And don't get me wrong, it functions fine for what it is. And because they have an intelligent, capable player base, we're able to accommodate and compromise for its shortcomings. But it could be better. That's all I'm sort of saying.
I've got a mad idea.
Oh, please.
How about every army gets your fixed army-wide specific stratagems. All the others go on the data sheet for that unit that it can use. So each data sheet gets 1 or 2 stratagems specifically for them that they can use. And then in a way, it's a lot easier to play. You've got your data sheet in front of you, or your app. You can see literally the stratagems that it can use. I mean, you could do that anyway if they just did that to the app, added it as a like war gear. Here are the stratagems that it could use. That would be super helpful. But you could even go a step further and limit like every unit to have 1 or 2 stratagems they can use.
Yeah, and I agree with that, though. I think more should be done to allow players to streamline their experience. I think Games Workshop definitely needs to further evaluate and expand their gaming aids. I think that's something that we need more in abundance, because I think we need binders and card systems and things where we can actually obviously as players we can create this ourselves, but something like that could definitely add some functionality. But anyway, getting back to the topic at hand, the stratagem system overall. I mean, look, I like the idea of adding cinematic flavor into the game. I like the aspiration of the stratagem system. I struggle with what it's become, because what it's become is their, default solution to a number of problems. And in a way, it's not nearly as creative as I would want it to be in a lot of instances. But also, it's the imbalance within it that creates some frustration for me. And I also think the core problem I have with it is the amount of it that's out there and the amount of rules that you as a player need to try and understand. And as I was alluding to earlier, the amount of mistakes that we as a player base make with it, whether intentionally or otherwise. Everyone makes mistakes with stratagems. I make mistakes with stratagems all the time. Like, all the time. I always have to go back and be like, oh, that doesn't actually do that. Sorry. Because you read it quickly, or you try and remember it and you remember pieces of it because, you've been reading every codex that's ever come out and you've forgotten. It usually happens when I'm playing armies, for the first time in a while or whatever. I'll be like, oh yeah, that thing does this. Oh wait, no, it does sort of do that, but it really means this, And it's
I mean, they could definitely narrow down the amount of stratagems from an army, because some of them, and I think it's one of those things that probably gets picked up in playtesting, or maybe it doesn't until it's out into the wider world, but most stratagems won't ever get used because they're just seen as not very efficient. They're for really obscure units that people don't want to use, or for they're overcosted, or for whatever reason. Even though with Psychic Awakening they've tried to buff units by, rather that they can't make the unit better by changing its data sheet, so they just give it a bunch of extra rules via stratagems to try and make you use units that are underperforming. But yeah, they could do something. They could just streamline down that list for whatever reason, and just focus on those core ones. But then it's nice to give players that option to do different strategies, so we're not all playing the same army in the exact same way. So, yeah, but maybe some of those stratagems need to just be a bit better, and some might need to be toned down. It's sort of interesting, the general evolution of them as well. So obviously you had your 1 or 2 or maybe 3 CP stratagem, and then they invented the concept that you can have a 0 CP stratagem, or the fact that it can be just once per game. Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see what else they can do. Can you think of any other kind of interesting rules interactions like that that's evolved over time? Because obviously you had some that were used to upgrade, like pre-game stratagems. Can you think of any other interesting ones of note?
I mean, not off the top of my head. I think, again, that's one of the interesting attributes of the stratagem system, though, is I made this quip a number of times when playing 8th edition, that we were all playing a beta rule set, right? Like the 8th edition rule set all the way through was them experimenting and expanding their ideas. And in many respects, 9th edition is supposedly the culmination of those creative ideas, or the culmination of those mechanics after, multiple years out in the world. So the evolution of it has been interesting to see, and the ideas they've introduced. And that is why I do believe that eventually they'll land at some kind of system like the one I'm outlining, because I think it's the logical conclusion for this system. But irrespective of that, no, I can't think of anything similar to that. But I mean, again, as I said, the psychic phase from editions of old followed that evolution. Everything's undergone evolution, even down to the the old combat mechanics, introducing the Overwatch step into the game, and that's become the way that reserves were. I mean, everything has been expanded upon to where we are now, to differing levels of efficiency. But yeah, I don't know. Did you have something in mind that I was supposed to say?
No, I was just trying to think of any more, because it is interesting how obviously, like in certain codexes, they kind of create a new concept that they sneak into the edition, and then it gets rolled out into future codexes, like zero CP stratagems, for example, just to limit how often that stratagem could be used. Because that a zero CP thing is like, we want you to do it, but we only want you to do it once per phase and not multiple times. Or we want, I mean, you can't do that anyway, technically, unless you're doing like open play, but it's all want you to do this action that's cool. So they don't want to tax you, but they do want to limit it to like once per turn or once per game via a stratagem. So it's interesting how those things do sort of sneak down into the system and trickle down into armies. And I think at the moment, even though we're playing 9th edition, we're really still only playing 8.5, because, as you said, a lot of armies, they revolve around stratagems, but they don't have new stratagems. They don't have their new codex yet. So it's like you almost can't fully evaluate 9th edition until every army's got their codex out, to see how it all plays. So there is an imbalance between like Guard and Space Marines, for example, even though Guard have Psychic Awakening updates, but it's like, that's still not really enough, I don't think.
I like the idea, it just occurred to me as a mechanic that could be explored, are stratagems that give you CP.
What, just outright, there are some that give you CP.
No. So rather than, okay, you have done a thing, spend 0 CP and it gives you CP. Yeah. I'm just talking about this stratagem costs plus free CP, but it does something really negative. Like, so for example, you could introduce the concept around chaos cultists, sacrificial units, for example, or things that you put in your army list and you pay points for, but you can sacrifice them to the gods, and that then grants you CP, for example.
So this leads on to things like, you could do that via actions as well, or a combination of it. So like Chaos Cultists, they can all have an action called, worship the dark gods. Get 3 units doing that a turn, get some CP. So it's like, do you want to, if you really run out of CP and you want to trade off those units shooting at something, you can get them to do something else. And I think that's another interesting conversation, maybe for another time, but generally how actions is like the new stratagems. It's like the new thing that they've added into this edition. There isn't too much in the way of interaction between stratagems and actions, but it's like, I would actually really prefer to see actions take a bit more of a forefront as something that they units can do over stratagems. I like the concept of raised banners, just doesn't really seem to work all that well. But all of it, there's a lot more almost narrative elements from actions. It feels like your unit's doing something. It feels like they're doing something more, whereas a stratagem, it just feels like, I've just given them +1 to hit. That's not a unit doing something thematic quite often. Sometimes when it's things like take cover, you get +1 to your save. Okay, it feels like I've gone to ground, but there's no negative. But you could also do that via an action, like, this unit's going to ground, therefore it's not shooting this turn, but it's getting +2 to its save, for example. So there's like a trade-off, and I like that aspect of an action. Whereas a stratagem there's no real downside. It just costs you CP, and it's like you've got a certain amount to spend in the game.
Yeah. That'd be interesting though, right? Yeah, like actions, or maybe there were ways to gain the equivalent CP and other resources, such as the sacrifice mechanic, for example, where, in the case of cultists, it's like, to summon this demon prince, you must sacrifice 20 cultists. And then it becomes quite an interesting thing. Like, say, for example, Bellacor's coming out. Gorgeous model, by the way. Bellacor's coming soon. Maybe the way that you get Bellacor is that you have to sacrifice 30 cultists and spend a stratagem, and then it becomes an interesting like mechanic where you have to build the army list around summoning the demon.
Well,
And he can't be summoned till turn 2, and it gives your opponent a chance to try and, like gun down like all the cultists that are in the circle or something before it happens.
I mean,
don't know.
they don't define it in the same way they do in Warhammer Underworlds, but in Warhammer Underworlds you have like conditions. It's like you can only play this card when this specific thing happens, and they sort of do that in terms of when a unit has been elected to be shot at, play this stratagem. But they don't really define it as a specific point on the card and break it out from the rest of the text. It's all lumped together. So you could have like condition, action, but like you said, those conditions could be something you get to do. Remove 10 models from a unit. That's your condition. You can elect to do that. Do this afterwards, and have negative trade-offs to those stratagems could be quite useful.
Also, as a completely crazy idea as well, on top of that, is you could look at other kind of like super stratagems where it is the overarching army strategy, i.e. command has kind of now been completely dissolved, or is there a very clear and precise specific thing that you're aiming to do? So it's, like last ditch defense or desperate breakout or whatever it is, where it's like our back is up against the wall and it's now or never, and you forego your ability to retain CP or use CP in exchange for one utterly incredible army-wide buff or something that makes it worth not gaining CP.
Yeah. Here's a good one, and it was in Maelstrom of War, the White Dwarf one that we talked about a while ago. The ability to change your secondaries mid-game. So let's say you did bring it down, you scored 3 points, but you go, oh god, I can't do this. Like 3 CP, change it to another one. You've still got your free victory points for that one, so it's not like you've reset it or you're gaining more than your 15. But that's like a really cool army-wide one. It fixes a problem that's sort of inherent with the game of you can kind of lose the game by just picking bad secondaries, and then it's like by turn 2 you're like, oh no, I really wish I picked something else. And that's like a bit of a crutch, but I think a positive fix to a problem that can happen to players, especially ones that are either inexperienced with their army or just haven't played against a certain army to know what secondaries to pick. So an ability like that I think would be quite useful.
No, I like that. I like the sound of it. I struggle to necessarily understand how that could be implemented with regards to the points you've already accrued. So I don't know whether it would need to be one of those things where it's like doing this gets rid of what you've done, or whether it would just be, okay, cool, that gets sidelined, but you can still only score a maximum of 15 on that secondary. So it becomes a case of the 3 you've scored you can only now add 12 or something. Yeah,
that's how I would do it personally.
Yeah.
I mean, you could argue or maybe you could game it because the first few points on something's easy, but the other points are harder. The other option would be to be a complete reset and be like, yeah, you don't get to keep those ones that you've scored. You start at 0, but that's the trade-off. At least you can get something. So both are viable.
Yeah. No, I agree. I do think as well they need to do more to kind of establish a consistent value to the CP, because CP is worth more in some armies than it is in others. To your point, Phil, CP is worth way less to a guardsman army right now than it is to a custodes army. So that feels like something that isn't fully factored in to the way that they've designed it presently.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's just because the Guard Codex is out of date and old and therefore doesn't have that ability, whereas the Custodes one just seemed to be really good, or at least got a bit bigger buffs in Psychic Awakening. I mean, it feels like most armies have like a certain combo of stratagems that, like, turn 1 or turn 2, a player is going to like reel off 3 stratagems that's like their core tactic for their army. So like, I'm going to buff this unit up, I'm going to spend a stratagem to move them over here, going to give them another buff to make them like shoot twice, but give them also +1 to hit, and that's like my big game winning combo. Feels like a lot of armies do that. I'm sure Guard players might think that as well. For me, with the Krieg, there isn't really one. There's a bunch of really generic. Oh, here's the other thing that stratagems can do. Obviously, like, you've got your upgrades, but you got your warlord traits. So, for example, your tank ace, you can have one by swapping out a warlord trait, but you can also gain another tank ace for a stratagem. So that's one of your little upgrade type mechanics. So yeah, the Psychic Awakening tank ace is quite useful as a stratagem to buff an army. But beyond that, like, your one that you're spending from that, there's not majorly any other kind of combos that people are going to be pulling off. You know, you got your Grenadiers, and if you got Bullgryns, you might have a couple from Psychic Awakening, but I don't think.
And your armored sentinels.
Yeah, if you got lots of armored sentinels, I think you've got a few there, but
You've got the options.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. But yeah, so getting back to stratagems as they are today and trying to kind of wrap this up, because as is often the way, we kind of went all over the place with it. I think right now stratagems are at an interesting point, and that is that it is clear to me, at least, that Games Workshop will persist over time now, releasing more and more stratagems for every army going forward. And obviously they've laid out their stall in terms of how they view stratagems and how important they are to their game design. Overall, I would say that the stratagem system has been an interesting experiment, an interesting idea, but I would say we're at a point now where it is starting to become more cumbersome and more difficult than it is positive. And I think Games Workshop need to do something to address the balance and to establish a more sensible and manageable system. Because at the moment it is very, very deep. And I think that's cool if you're one of the people who can, you know, memorize everything and know all the things. But for your average player, I think it's one too far or one too many. But I like what it is in essence. And I'm hopeful that they will continue to improve it. But I feel like we are at this weird point now where, you know, we're at bursting point. One more little bit on top of that Jenga tower, and it could all start, you know, falling down. I don't know. What do you reckon, Phil?
Yeah, it's an odd one. I think overall, I do like stratagems. It adds an interesting layer into the game. Sort of weird thinking back to 7th edition where we didn't have that at all, and how used to it we are. In a way, I sort of do, you know, when we did our episode talking about 6th and 7th edition, I do like that style of gameplay, and the stratagem system sort of fundamentally changes what 40k is. Yep. Between editions, that's probably the biggest change.
Huge change,
completely. Yeah. I think overall, yeah, it does add narrative elements to it. So I think that's great. That is a positive. But yeah, I think there is some issues around either an imbalance, as you say, where some armies just have crap ones, or there's just too many. And in a way, it's like we said there's too many, but then we just we just created a bunch of concepts for cool stratagems that we'd love to see. So, I mean, do we want to have our cake and eat it? Maybe. It's like, yeah, it's hard. I think it's, I think if they just laid out the stratagems in the books better, or if they did divide them by phase or by unit, you could then just easily manage the combos a lot easier. Or just look at the ones specific to your army that you collect. So if you've got White Scar Space Marines with loads of bikes, you can just narrow down to the bike specific stratagems, for example, and not have to look at all the Gravis or Phobos armor because you don't have any in your collection. But they're all intermixed in that book, and you've kind of got to, look through the weeds to try and work out what stratagems your army can even use, let alone, the other stuff in there. So I think there's some just, general user experience stuff in quality of life improvements that could be made either via the app or via just how they lay out that book slightly. I think if you were to trim down the number of stratagems, some people might complain, but then I think there's just a lot that people don't use anyway because everyone's agreed what are the good ones, and people tend to use a handful. And I think this is something we talked about on a previous episode. How about at the beginning of your game, you pick 5 stratagems. That's all you have. You don't have access to a whole book. It's like a card mechanic system. You pick your deck of 5. That's what you've got for your game. I think something like that would actually really improve how you play the game, because it just gets rid of that whole thing of I forgot which ones to use, because you're actually limiting yourself to what you've got.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, again, going back to what you were saying, where we started being creative about other things that we could add or other stratagems that they could explore. Obviously, the stratagem system is fundamentally good because of that, because it is creative, because it is interesting. My complaint is that they have bloated the system with a lot of different options, and they haven't given us mechanics that streamline the system and efficiently integrate it into your game. And they also haven't done enough to explain interactions between stratagems in the rare instances where you do something and then your opponent reacts with something else. And I think that's the thing. There's a lot of broad acknowledgement that this needs that refinement. But I think we can all agree that it's a fun system. It's an interesting system. It is a great idea. It just isn't brilliantly executed.
Yeah,
would be my view on it.
Yeah, I think you were talking about how if you had stratagems in your command phase, that would be good. Now, if we were to combine the two ideas, so I think if you had army-wide stratagems that you select 5 of for your game, and those are the ones that you apply specifically in your command phase, I think that would work really well, because you're limiting the amount that you got to remember. And then each unit has 1 or 2 stratagems specific to them built into their data sheet that you can use during other phases of the game. You can still have those sort of more interesting, flavorful moments that are a bit more like being acted on impulse. I think that might work quite well between them. So you've got your command level. This is what your commander's ordering your whole army to do, or ordering specific units to do. Yeah. And you've sort of selected those tactics because you pick them like you pick secondaries. You've seen your army. You're going, I'm going to want this, this, and this for my army to do my tactic. And then you've got some extra fun, flavorful ones that's specific to units that you can just throw in. And by doing that, you're not limiting. You are limiting yourself to, you got your 5, but there's probably another like 10 that you can access. You don't have 30 that you got to remember, because you've narrowed it down. You really focused what stratagems to use in what particular phases. So I think something like that, if you're going down that kind of rigid, certain stratagems can only be used at certain points, that might be a fun way of doing it.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I think, if you had the 5 or even 10 army stratagems that you select, but then everything, and they can only be used in command phases because they are abilities that will happen in your turn or your preceding turn, that works for me. But then I think, you just then access the generic 8 or so stratagems for the rest of it. Your command rerolls, your interrupts, your breakouts, your everything else. The generic suite of core stratagems is applicable to all and active in all phases. but the stratagems you select for your army may only be used in the command phases, of which I would suggest you need to introduce a start and an end game command phase to streamline that further. Now, it means that obviously in that reality, stratagems as they are today would be needed to be reworked and reworded. But I still think it's the best way of tackling it and adding it to the game without making it too cumbersome.
Yeah.
But if you were to add unit specific stuff, that's fine. But then that's just unit abilities at that point, and then it sort of becomes like, well, if it's a core thing the unit does, just let them have it as an ability, as we were saying before.
Well, I think we've solved it for the 10th edition. You can have that one, Robin, on us for free.
There you go. When I get that job as the core game designer or whatever it is for the Warhammer Studios, would I have to stop doing the podcast if I became a Games Workshop employee?
I believe so, yeah.
Is that it? Would you not think they'd like me going online and slagging off?
I think it's more. I don't think any of them are out to do interviews and things like that.
Are they not? Only with only with Wade.
I mean, if you could do that job and also do a weekly podcast with Wade, I'd be fine with that. I'd do a Zoom call into that one.
Oh, you'll join that?
I'd join. Bonus extra. Some random dude.
Yeah, you, me, and Wade talking through the things. We can all awkwardly try and talk to. Oh God, why have I forgotten his name? Your hero.
Oh, Pete.
No, not Pete. Come on now. Your
John
hero.
Blanche.
John Blanche.
Oh, yeah.
We could all awkwardly try and talk to John Blanche while he's drawing and doesn't want to be spoken to. What a great podcast that was.
Oh, I really liked that episode.
Did you really like that?
Well,
Thing is, don't get me wrong.
I liked it from a technical point of view of learning how he draws. So I found that really interesting.
I loved everything about Blanche in that process. I loved watching him work. I loved watching him operate. But my favorite thing was watching Wade having to kind of get him to talk when he clearly didn't want to. He was very much like, "Yes, I'm drawing right here. So, can you? Oh God, this guy's really senior. Like you can hear it sort of rattling around in the back of his mind. He's like, this guy's like one of the number. He's like probably number 3 in the pecking order of this company, maybe even number 2.
I think it's that thing of drawing's quite a silent medium, which isn't ideal for a podcast.
Yeah.
So I think they do even say like you've got to really go to the YouTube channel and watch the video version because, I've only ever watched the video versions. Like, geez, the podcast version of that must be quite bizarre.
We should entertain ourselves and listen to it sometime and sort of talk through what we thought of it. But yeah, I just think it was funny. Like, we can be like that. We can try and awkwardly ask questions to a man who clearly isn't in a place where he wants to answer them. That's the way forwards. It'll be like when we got Scary on, eh? Hey, there he is again. Although we have been invited to go on his show, haven't we, Phil?
We have, yeah.
I know, right? We're becoming part of that YouTube content creator phenomena where we all start turning up on each other's shows.
And that's amazing. So,
but what have we got to sell, Phil? What have we got to sell?
T-shirts with floaty beards on them.
Are you going to make those?
I'm going to. I decided I'm going to get you one that just says technically on it as well. I think it'd be a good one.
Yes.
Then we get a T-shirt each.
Technically.
Yeah.
Now that you've said it, I've become immediately self-aware of it. I'm like, oh no, I do say that all the time.
At least once an episode, or twice.
Mate, there it is. It's out there in the ether. I've ruined myself. I'm going to forever be conscious of that. Or I'm not, because I'm just too vain and self-assured.
I know. As you stroke that Knight of the Inner Circle award.
Oh, exactly. Proof that once upon a time I was liked, but now my ego has taken over. I've become a monster. I wouldn't, the man who won that Knight of the Inner Circle award wouldn't recognize me anymore. He'd be like, what have you become? You're a monster. Anyway, there you go. No. Anyway, yeah, so we were invited onto Scary's thing. We might do that. I doubt it. I mean, I probably won't do it. Phil might get him for it. He's got stuff to sell.
I like to shield, yeah.
Yeah, you got those shields you want to try and shift.
Oh, to all those Dark Elder players, yeah, I'm sure that'll go down.
Yeah, come on, Dark Elder players. Well, they might need them for like alternate skyboards or whatever.
Actually, hover discs. Yeah, that's
Exactly,
how I'll rebrand
right?
them.
Alternate options for Hellions.
Yeah, they make them look
Exactly.
more like those. Is it Zinch Zinch have got those little circular discs? Yeah.
The discs of Zinch, yeah. But you could turn it around on the Scurry thing and be like, oh, you can't buy Hellions anymore. Just buy a box of witches and some of my lovely shields. Hellions, hey,
Dumb.
hey,
Dumb.
hey. I'll tell you what. I'll sell you both 60 quid for a pair. Come on now. Get in
Sounds
there.
like a good deal.
Exactly. But there we go. Anyway, thank you guys. That was us rambling about stratagems. We'll do whatever it is that comes next. It could be something quiz related, but maybe not because
It won't be.
we don't know yet.
It won't.
We haven't recorded it. We're relying on Rich to have created a quiz. If he has, that's what's coming next. If not, just be the end of the show.
Fingers on buzzers, everyone, because it's time for the end of the show quiz.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the End of the Show quiz. I say this week's edition, it's been about a year since we've been allowed back on to run this. But it's very exciting.
Allowed back on. That makes it sound so much more serious than it actually is. It's just that we've been all very busy and it's not been a possibility.
Something probably happened that took people's minds off what else was going on in the world.
I know, right? I know. I can't think of it myself.
We don't talk about that.
No.
Yeah,
No. Guy on, where was it? Podbean. The guy on Podbean got offended when we mentioned COVID, so now we never talk about it anymore.
Well, you said it now. I mean, I tried
to... no, he's going to write another negative comment.
You have to bleep that out.
Oh, well, it's fine. We'll roll with it.
Anyway, welcome to the End of the Show quiz, everyone. I am Richie, your host. Some of you may remember me. Early, long-term listeners will remember me. New people, this is what I sound like. If you've heard tell of me and my great exploits occasionally at the hobby of Warhammer 40,000. But enough about me. Let me introduce the rest of the competitors for this week's quiz. First up, we'll start with the most important people, the special guests. First up, we have Tim. Tim has joined us.
I have the utmost faith in you, Tim. You're gonna do great.
I mean, if it'll make you feel any better, I'm not particularly sure I'm any good at writing quizzes, so hopefully everyone enjoys this.
Brilliant.
But more importantly, we have our second competitor who you may have heard speaking already. We have possibly reigning champion, Dan.
Why not, eh? I mean, in my own mind, that's all I can say. I'm definitely the champion in my own ethos.
Actually, wasn't he who shall not be named the actual the champion from Christmas? The last time we did the big.
He was. Yeah.
Yeah, Joe won the Big Fat Quiz of 2019, which we had hoped to repeat in 2020, but obviously, that thing that I'm not allowed to talk about got in the way of that. Which is a shame because I spent quite a lot of money on equipment that I was hoping to use to increase the audio quality and production. But hopefully maybe at the end of 2021, we'll be able to bring the Big Fat Quiz of the Year back and, recapture this as a regular feature of our show.
Rekindle that magic.
Exactly.
Okay, well, that's Dan, our second competitor. And last but by no means least is Philip.
Well, thanks very much. I'm here last place already, it seems.
It's where you belong, mate.
I know. Well, with this quiz, it tends to always be a race to the bottom because no one seems to get most of the questions. So the people playing at home probably will do better than any of us. Exactly.
It's a fantastic exhibition of how unqualified we actually are to be hosting a 40k podcast, really.
Well, that's true. Certainly. Incorrect opinions and lots of exactly.
That's it. It's like when you talk to those really over the top, like really kind of like neckbeardy guys who used to tell you about like the improbable chances of how I shot a dreadnought on full wounds with a heavy bolter and killed it. It's like, how is that even possible? I'm telling you it happened. All right, okay, fine.
Is that a reference to how I killed a knight with Sergeant Harker?
It is interesting that immediately entered my mind as I started to try and think of examples. I mean, it's weird, isn't it? Because in the modern 40k game, some of those more preposterous examples of weird things happening don't happen nearly as much, because back in like 7th downwards, it was always possible that if you rolled enough 6s, anything was possible. Whereas in like 8th and 9th, there's a certain degree of statistic probabilities based on quantity of wounds and damage output that make all of that much less likely. But anyway, there you go. Long story short, we're all full of nonsense, but here we are quizzing it up.
Well, best of luck, everyone. I hope you, at the very least, enjoy yourselves as we go through this quiz. I've tried to.
You know what I would enjoy mostly, Rich, is if you gave us an opportunity to.
I was going to come on to the buzzers.
You were going to do it.
I hadn't
Okay,
forgotten.
fine,
I mean, I had, but then in my head, I reminded myself as I finished that sentence.
There you go. So you and me both, seemingly.
It's a classic instance of Richie running the show, but Dan still can't get over the fact that he's not actually hosting this one segment that he gives over to someone else. He really struggles.
I'm a horrible backseat driver. It was funniest. It was funnier still when we did it in the big fat quiz, though, right? Because there were so many instances where Rich was doing stuff, and I was like, "No, Rich, no, shush, move on." And he was like, "Oh yeah, sorry," and then it was a bad exercise in. Yeah, I get twitchy. Anyway, sorry, Rich. I will be silent.
Right. So yeah. Well, thank you very much, Dan. So the next thing we have to do is introduce everyone's buzzer, because we won't skip how quizzes work. Because we're assuming that people know the base concepts of how a quiz works. But what's unique is everyone here has their own buzzers. So let's go through everyone and let us hear your novelty buzzers, starting with Tim.
Beautiful sounding buzzer there, Tim.
Is it worth telling the listeners that we don't actually know what the buzzers sound like at this point? Because Dan's going
No, that would ruin the movie magic.
Okay.
That would take away from what we are accomplishing here.
We're professionals.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The utmost professionals.
Well, speaking of utmost professionals, let's hear Dan's buzzer.
Why, of course. My buzzer sounds a little like this. Finland! Isn't that lovely?
Definitely makes me think of you.
Exactly.
Thank you, Dan. And for our final buzzer, Phil.
Well, thank you very much. Obviously, it's the classic. I've had it many a times before. You've heard it before. Here it is. No, that will be one of Dan's.
I mean, it could be anything, Phil. Don't speak with such self-assuredness in these instances.
Cool. Well, with all the buzzer sounds done, and us doing a quick buzzer test there in real time, the guys all we use a special app so we can check who's buzzers in, and the guys all tested their buzzers at the same time. So that was very handy. So we're all set. We're all ready to go in the first end of the show quiz for quite a while. And let's see how it goes. Good luck, everyone. And if you're playing along at home, do be sure to leave in the comments any of these questions which I got wrong. And then you dispute the answers for. Okay. So, question number 1.
Question number 1.
What returned to Warhammer community this week after a 17-month hiatus?
Finland!
Oh, Dan has buzzed in.
One of those comic books, maybe Never Chosen.
Was not one of those comic books.
Oh.
Phil's buzzed in.
Is it Meta Watch?
It is. It's not Meta Watch. That doesn't. We've had that more often than 17.
Oh, I know. I
months
just can't think what's been that long.
Tim, what's your answer, mate?
Tim,
you may as
free
well.
answer.
Has Tim legitimately frozen, or
I
is he just not here?
think we've lost him. I think we
lost him. Let's pause for a moment while we regain a Tim.
5 minutes later.
I'm going to pass. I can't think outside of the comics myself, so...
Can we go around again? Because I know what it is.
Phil.
I know what it is.
There's no points, Phil, but you can take a guess as you have more time to think about it.
It's the Sisters of Battle Bulletin.
It is the Battle Sister Bulletin. Battle Sister Bulletin has returned.
Because they brought back Boogie Board Sister, and now they get the Boogie Board Bulletin.
Well, hang on, let's not get ahead of ourselves. There might be questions that
Oh,
follow
I
on
see.
from the
Oh, my
previous
goodness.
questions.
All right, okay.
So, question number 2. As part of the first Battle Sister Bulletin in 17 months, which model did they reveal? Finland! Dan has buzzed in.
I don't know her official name, but Boogie Board Sister.
I'm sorry, Dan, that's not the correct answer.
Oh, for the love.
Phil, what is the answer?
Is it something like Celestine? Yeah.
Celestine?
Something like Celestine.
Celestine? It's
Celery?
something like that.
I'm sorry, I can't accept that, Phil.
No.
No, it's not. I mean, it's in some ways you're close, but in many ways you're not. Tim?
That's always the way.
Not a new Repenter.
No, it's not. It's not a new Repenter.
Is it a Celestine or Celestine? No, we did that already.
No, unfortunately. No, the correct answer is a Celestian Sacristant.
Half point.
I was so close.
Well, no, you said Celestine, and Celestine is the saint, is the living saint.
Yeah,
so I can't really give you a point for that.
No, Phil.
I
No
wouldn't
dice.
be fair. I mean, then I'd have to give Dan a point for Boogie Board, and I'm not doing that.
But that's way off.
No, but you understood what I meant, though.
Yeah,
That
but I think the
will
people at home
always-
understood too.
Exactly. Everyone looks at it and thinks Boogie Board Sister. That's what the squad will be called.
I mean, I hope not. I'm getting a squad of them.
Exactly. A squad of Boogie Boards. It's going to be great.
I'm not getting it now. I'm not if you're going to call them Boogie Boards.
You will
All right.
do that. You won't be able to help yourself.
Moving on to question number 3. All to play for.
Yeah.
Scores are all level at the minute.
Brilliant.
Nice low number.
Yep.
I'm confident for Phil could come back with some points here, because also this week on Warhammer Community we saw the return of Meta Watch, this time focusing on Drukhari. But who were the special guests from the competitive community? Phil has buzzed in.
It's Nick Nadavazi and Skari.
Correct. Point to Phil.
Lucky
Very
you,
much.
Phil.
I mean, I did happen to read it. Well, I said I read it. I stared at it and looked at the pictures and was like, oh, see, Joe didn't make it on as a Drukhari expert. Oh, well.
I mean, that's because it's Joe. What were you hoping for?
I know, apparently he can beat you with them, Dan.
Oh, mate, anyone can beat me at the moment in 9th edition. I'm an absolute bilge.
I prefer to think you're still very good and only true pro players can beat you. That's what I'm telling you.
That is true. That is definitely a good way of looking at it.
Yeah. Okay. So on to question number 4.
Question number 4.
According to Warhammer Community, so this may not necessarily live up to its claims in reality, who can, quote, basically chop a tank in half? Finland! Dan has buzzed in.
Bellicore.
I mean, I don't think that's the correct
No,
pronunciation.
Bellicore
yes,
is the pronunciation of his name. But yes.
It is Bellicore. Correct. According to Warhammer Community, he could basically chop a tank in half with his mighty sword.
They haven't. Have they said that they're gonna, when they do that box set, is it gonna have actual rules in it for him? Is it gonna be in the? They will be, right? It'll have 40k rules. Yeah.
Every model does.
But because he's a weird dual purpose one, it will have Age of Sigmar and 40k rules.
Must
Weird.
Must do.
He could have both a war scroll and a data sheet in his box.
Well, there you go. Look at you remembering what Age of Sigmar stuff's called.
Yeah, look at me wasting potential questions for the future.
I know, right? I know.
But following on from that reveal that Bellicore could basically chop a tank in half with his powerful sword, what was quite special about his sword in terms of its stats that would enable it to chop a tank in half? Phil has buzzed in first.
Ignores invuln saves.
Correct. It ignores invulnerable saves.
I mean, most tanks don't have invuln saves though, but
yeah, but for those that do, oof.
No, that's true. Those knights.
Oh, it's D3 plus 3 damage per hit, ignoring invuns, AP -4.
I was going to say, is it AP -4? I was going to say it's AP -5, but obviously I would have been wrong.
I mean, according to Warhammer Community, it's AP -4. So who knows?
I mean,
what
it could be anything, couldn't it? Who knows? With their track record.
When he's in the assault doctrine, he gets it.
Well, it's true.
Assuming Chaos get doctrines, yeah.
Well, exactly. Maybe Warhammer Community thinks they already do. Who knows?
Okay, so we're 1/3 of the way through the quiz. Phil is on 2 points. Dan is on 1 point. Tim bring up the rear with still on the starting grid, but still to play for.
Tim's tying his shoelaces, but he's about ready to get sprinting.
Don't you worry, mate. Don't you worry.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, now we're going to look at some stat-based questions. So it's more be browsing the Warhammer app and finding some interesting.
This is my time to shine.
Oh, there you go. According to the Warhammer app, how many different types of autocannon are there? Tim has buzzed in first.
5.
Tim has gone for 5. That is incorrect. Phil.
No, I was actually going to say 5 as well. So I'm going to say 6.
Phil's. I mean, if you're not knowing how this is going to work, if you just say 6, Dan will say 7. So, are you
Well, it could be
confident on 6?
lower. Could be lower.
Could go for 4.
Yeah,
You're letting me change my mind.
So this is for every entry in the Warhammer app for a weapon that has autocannon in its name.
Oh, every entry. I thought it was like different types for some reason.
I mean, it's the same thing, really, isn't it? Anything that's an autocannon.
Okay. I redact my answer.
Well, you can't, mate. It's there now.
You set the ball rolling with 5, Tim.
Yeah. And Phil said 6.
Next.
I would go a lot higher now, Dan.
Well, exactly. Well, I don't need to go a lot higher. I'll just say 7.
Oh.
You going with Phil's going with 6?
Well, no, I'll go for 10 now.
Oh, hang on. What is this?
If he gets to change, I get to change.
Clearly, none of us know the answer. This is null and void.
60.
Okay, Tim has changed. Tim has changed to 60.
Cool. I'm going to go with 1.
Dan's going with 1, and Phil, you're going with 10.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, Tim, you went a little too high there. The correct answer is 22.
Ooh.
So Phil gets a point.
Well
Thanks,
done,
Dan.
Phil. Well done for your well-earned point.
It was a guess.
No, you don't say.
I'm shocked.
Oh my god.
There's a real skill to winning this quiz, haven't
Oh,
you?
clearly.
It's how
Complaining seems to be.
Okay, moving on to question number 7.
Speechless, Phil. Speechless.
Question number 7. Which character has a 2+ invulnerable save? Oh, Phil has buzzed in.
Makari.
It is Makari. Phil's storming ahead.
Mate,
What's
you were
happened?
ever so quicker than me on that one.
Well, it's like I knew it was the grot that is next to Gazgul, and I buzzed, and then I was like, oh god, I can't remember his name now. I'm gone blank.
Well, you know, you
But
could have
then it came
also
back.
you could have also technically said a Drakari Archon.
As standard on profile?
Well, a 2-up invad isn't standard on Makari's profile.
Yeah, it is.
Is it?
Yeah, it's part of his ability.
Is that what a 2-up invad is on his profile?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's a 2+ invulnerable save.
On his profile?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's not. It's not. You don't add war gear. Like with Archon, you got to add some war gear or something.
No, it comes. Yeah, it comes standard. The Shadow Field or whatever it is a standard war gear
Well,
piece for the Archon.
The answer
It doesn't matter. We're going for Makari because that is the right answer.
Yes, so I've gone. Yeah, thank you, Dan, for the support.
It's all right, mate. It's all right.
I may bear this in mind if it comes to a tiebreak.
I don't think it will, mate. Don't you worry.
Okay, question number 8. According to the Warhammer app, how many different types of rhino are there? Finland! Dan has buzzed in.
So I would say there are 3 types of rhino.
Dan has gone for 3. Phil, you buzzed in next.
I'm going for 5.
And unfortunately, that means we're not going to ask what Tim thinks because it is correct. It's 5.
Can you name them, Phil? Can you name even 3 of them?
One of them's going to be the Sisters Rhino. Another one is going to be a generic Space Marine Rhino. Another one's going to be a Chaos Rhino.
Oh, I forgot.
I imagine there's also going to be a... So I was going to say Space Wolf Rhino, but they don't get them anymore. Oh, a Sisters of Silence rhino.
Yeah.
There's one more.
One more rhino. Come on. Bet it all on the last rhino. Who would have a different sort of rhino?
I'll give you a quick. That Dan's hint isn't actually helpful.
Yeah.
Oh, is it the Space Marine Command Rhino from Warhammer World?
It's the Forge World Damocles Command Rhino. Yeah, you are getting. Oh, and if you meant the special rhinos in that box, that's no longer valid because it doesn't have rules anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't have
Oh,
to.
right. Yeah,
that's not a thing.
Technically, as well, the Inquisition henchmen have a rhino, but it's just a Space Marine rhino, I believe, or it's the same.
No, they don't. They just
don't.
get access. They can just ride in any Imperial transport.
Does the Grey Knights have a separate rhino? Because that was one of the rhinos I was going to call out. Because normally, old school Grey Knights had psychic rhinos.
I haven't included them because it's the same unit with the same datasheet name.
Okay, so
it's just called Rhino.
Fine. There you are, 5, mate.
5 so it's points for Phil.
That was a well-earned point, mate. Well done for remembering all the things.
All right. Let me reset the buzzers. Nearly forgot then. The most expensive points-wise model in Warhammer 40,000 costs 5,500 points. But which model is it? Give him a chance, Phil. Come on, Phil's buzzed in first.
Surely it's got to be the Warlord Titan.
Well done, Phil. Another point to you. Storming ahead, very unlike you.
Thank you.
Uncharacteristic. Still well done so far. All to play for, mostly still to go. Moving on to question number 10 as a follow-up. The Warlord Titan is the most expensive points model in the game at 5,500 points. But how many wounds does it have? Phil's buzzed in first.
Something crazy like 100.
Phil's gone for 100 and he's not correct. Next to buzz in was Dan.
48.
Dan has gone for 48. Probably thinking it's like his Reaver Titan that's not very good. Last time was Tim. What is your guess?
For 5,000 points, it's got to have like an Invun and probably a Feel No Pain. But let's just say 62.
The correct answer was 120 wounds.
Ooh. Lots.
How much?
Good lord.
How much does the Tau flying thing have? Does anyone know?
No one knows.
No.
No one knows offhand. No, it has 120 wounds, which is frankly ridiculous. Okay, into the home stretch. 5 questions to go.
Who could win?
Come on.
I mean, no one would believe you if we told you.
No, I know.
Listeners from a year ago would not be believing this.
I'll tell you what, I did win the very first quiz.
Oh, la-di-da.
So, just
okay.
So, that was probably one of the only times.
Question number 11. When you buy the current Heavy Intercessors box set, how many spare models come in that box?
Finland!
Dan has buzzed in.
That would be 7 spare models.
That is correct. Can you name those 7 models?
I can. A captain with mastercrafted heavy bolt rifle. One of the Mancers, one of the different Necron Chiromancer, something or other. Chronomancer, whatever it is. That
is
thing.
the Chronomancer.
And 5 flailed ones.
That is correct. There are 7 spare models that you get in the Heavy Intercessor box set, plus also 48 pieces of Kill Team terrain.
That's true. I own it all. Very useful.
There you go. Dan trying to catch up now. Okay.
That's worth 5 points, right? Yeah.
Just the one. Not just the one.
Oh, just the one.
Question number 12. Which one of these is the odd one out? Is it the Elysian Drop Sentinel, the Death Korps Death Rider, the Chaplain Dreadnought, or the Gorgon Transport? Phil has buzzed in.
It's the Death Korps Death Rider because it's the only one with rules in 40k still.
That's correct. The Death Korps Death Rider is the only one of those which still has rules, unlike any of the Elysian Drop Troops. And yet you didn't complain about it on social media like the Death Korps fans.
Well, if we'd let you on, maybe you would have.
Maybe.
Like he's definitely not doing right now.
Just for that, Phil, I'm going to deduct a point from you.
Oh.
Mostly because I don't think it'll make any difference at this point anyway.
Fair enough.
Question number 13. In June of 2020, who did Games Workshop announce that they would be returning some money to? And Tim is buzzed in.
Was that the staff? And because they had a good, successful year, and so
Ooh, sort of, but it's not right.
okay.
Dan.
The British government, they refunded the furlough scheme.
It was the British government because they got the furlough scheme. But I'll give Tim a point as well because they'd had such a successful year in spite of the pandemic. Good guy, Games Workshop.
Pity point. Basically,
He's off the starting blocks.
Well, Tim's correct because basically for them to do any share payouts, they had to repay the government for the furlough scheme. So that's
is that what it was?
Okay, I take it back. That wasn't Nice Guy Games.
You've exposed them for the greedy corporate company they are.
That's what.
No, it might work. It still seemed like
I bet they only put those solar panels on the roof so as they could, burn birds or something. Monsters.
Question 14. Oh wait,
reset those buzzers.
Oh no. Okay, I've reset the buzzers now. Okay. Question 14. Who had a mysterious and covered up glow up between when they were first announced and when they actually went on sale? Phil.
It's Uriel Ventress.
It was Captain Uriel Ventress, who looks suspiciously not as silly when he actually launched as when he was first announced.
I quite like that original derpy face, actually.
I mean, it was quite good. He looked like the baby from the belly in Total Recall. You remember that guy? Quaid.
Oh God,
Quaid. He looked like I can't remember the name.
Touch
of the
me.
Yeah, that was it. Touch me, Quaid. Touch me.
Isn't that like the secret ruler of all the mutants or something? From
I think so. Yeah.
He starts
like
the revolution or whatever.
But he had that face. He looked like the little baby inside of the guy's chest. It was the lips. Anyway.
Poor Uriel. He looks so much nicer now. Question number 15, the final question for this week's quiz. When building a battle-forged army of 2,000 points, what is the maximum amount of dreadnoughts that you can fit into a list? Tim. And just to clarify, I mean, yeah, literally maximum, but also only dreadnoughts. So only dreadnoughts. Tim.
I'm gonna say 8.
Tim has gone for 8. It's close, but it's not correct. I mean, it's not actually that close. It's not correct.
Oh.
Next up was Dan.
I'm going to say 13.
Dan's going to say 13. Phil?
Have we lost Phil now?
No, I was counting on my fingers. I'm going to say 16.
And Phil's going to say 16. The correct answer is 14.
Ooh.
So that's a point. We just check it's 14. Yes, it is 14. That's a point to Dan. For those eagle-eyed listeners who are interested to know how you do that, it's through 2 Vanguard detachments, one led by Hecaton Icos with 3 dreadnoughts and 3 venerable dreadnoughts, and another Vanguard detachment led by Brayef Ashmantle with 3 Contemptor dreadnoughts and 3 Ironclad dreadnoughts. That is exactly 2,000 points. And is completely legal in a competitive game.
There you go. Will we be seeing that on the tabletop soon, Rich?
No, because that's got too many dreadnoughts for me.
That's too many dreadnoughts.
Too many dreadnoughts, and there's no carrot.
Too many dreadnoughts. You're happy with.
Sounds like the right amount, like a good. It's like those like the Armiger style lists you see going around at the moment. The mini knights.
If I hadn't already got my Red Scorpions dreadnought list, this is one I could consider. But it's too many different chapters. You could consider it, Phil, because it's Minotaurs.
No, that's true. Well, I will get him at some point, but I won't get him. I'll get the Death Guard Contemptor Dreadnought from Forge World and convert him up to look more like him.
Nice
the
model.
Death Guard Contemptor Dreadnoughts are the best Contemptor
Yeah, it's
Dreadnoughts.
just got cool shoulder pads.
I quite like the Salamanders one as well. But then Salamanders always look cool. They're a cool army. Is that it, Rich? Are we out of questions?
That is the end of this week's quiz, and I'm
Aw.
pleased
I
to
wonder who won.
I'm pleased to announce
It was me.
the sadly, Tim, no, it wasn't you.
Oh,
But thank you very much for playing. You were a good runner up. You're a good runner up. But this week our winner was Phil. Congratulations!
Hey!
Thank you very much. Thank you. Great quiz,
Sorry.
Richard.
With
Yeah.
a total of 6 points to Dan's second place 4. That is after your deductions for being cheeky, though.
I never know what your quiz is going to bring. I feel like no matter how much research I'll do, it will just be like I've researched completely the wrong things. It's like studying for like French, and I would have studied Italian.
I mean, you can usually be pretty sure to get some of them just by seeing whatever was on Warhammer Community in the last week. That's what I do. Because that's what I do when I write the questions.
Right.
I look there for the resources.
There you go. When we come back and do this again in I don't know, a month's time or something, maybe we should just turn it into a once a month thing or whatever. You'll be better prepared, Tim.
Maybe, but to be honest, I'm happy to be a seat filler anyway, so it's okay.
Good times. We appreciate you being there, filling the seat, mate. It's always a pleasure to have you, and you too, Rich. Thank you very much for a great quiz, mate. It was enjoyable.
Yeah.
No, my pleasure being here. I hope the listeners enjoyed it as well. And leave a comment if you'd like to see more, or if you have any suggestions or questions. Actually, no, maybe don't, because then Phil will just read them anyway, so that won't actually help.
That's how we won this time.
Yeah.
We had all the insider knowledge.
Research.
Unbelievable research. There you go. Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to move on now to the bit at the end of the show where we do like the outro and stuff. So moving on, transitional noise. Woo! Well, because the gang's all here, we figured we may as well do the intro with their contributions added to it. So joining us in the outro section, you can hear by the sound of Richie opening a bottle of port or whatever he's on right there. We got Richie still.
I didn't mean to. I thought I put my mic on mute at that point.
And then there's Phil.
I'm still here.
You're always here, Phil.
Wearing my crown.
Wearing a crown. Your Burger King crown. Oh my God, have we lost him? No, he's there.
No, he's there. He just freezes himself.
He just froze for a moment to bask in his glory.
Yes.
And Tim's here as well, still also. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
Do you feel like that quiz went well, mate? You feel confident? You're happy with that performance?
I am ecstatic with my performance. I set a target, and I hit that target, and I'm proud of myself.
Mate, well done. Well done.
Thanks.
Solid performance. So yeah, so in this part of the podcast, it's literally just the outro bit where we talk a bit of general stuff, answer some questions that have been raised within our community channels, and just generally catch up, I suppose. So yeah, you looking forward, Tim, to actually rolling some dice soon? You haven't really played many games lately, have you?
No, I've been a bit of a busy bee between work and other hobbies and just ploughing along with the Death Guards. But yes, I am super looking forward to rolling some dice. As soon as I get jabbed up, I've been telling everybody this, I'm venturing back out into the world. I think the first tournament I'd like to go to would be an official Warhammer one. I know there's like Beachhead Brawl and stuff, which I did consider, but also it just means I've still got a load to do with my Death Guard, so it just gives me more time to paint them, really.
We have definitely made that that job difficult for yourself, right? Because I mean, you're doing like some intense conversions. Your what's it McCall's it thing with the shredder is absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, the bloat drone with the
bloat drone. That's it. Yeah, your converted bloat drone
you.
looked absolutely amazing.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
have you shared that on the internet yet?
No, not yet. Just because I can't take a decent photo of it with my phone and lighting. I need to get around to Phil's or like a workmate's and use their camera gear, really.
There you go. Travel to Phil's house just to use his camera equipment. Push him aside, wander in. Yeah, Phil, nice to see you, mate. Come on now.
Yeah, exactly. Down to business.
I literally just use an iPhone, so it's nothing too special.
Right.
You must have like some kind of photo cabinet.
I do have a light box, that I use for when it's on a white background or a black background. Then I use that, which does help. But honestly, just having a good quality camera makes all the difference. I think more than fancy lighting.
I think the light booth does actually make a bit of a difference because the lighting in my apartment is not that great. I have like my painting light and stuff, but that's only one light, and you kind of want the light to be all around in a way.
Yeah, like if you can get by a window and get some daylight, then that is a good substitute, I think.
Yeah.
It would probably be cheaper for you just to buy one of those like light boxes than to travel to Phil's abode.
I'm pretty sure you can get them pretty cheap for like 50 quid or something.
I will investigate. But yeah, I should.
Look at Phil there. Pretty cheap, 50 quid. Mr. Moneybags.
I know. Well, let's face it, if you're in a GW hobby, like £50 is actually relatively cheap considering the latest releases.
Well, I mean, I think some of them can cost up to like 100 odd quid. So, I mean, it's comparatively cheap in comparison to what you could pay for.
I was talking to a friend about this the other day, like how we just justify things so easily. So it's like, oh, I need to fix something in my apartment. Oh, maybe I could just hack it and, I can live with it for a few more weeks. New boxed game drops by Warhammer that's worth £130. Take my money. It's fine. Justified.
Did you buy the Curse City as well, did you, Tim?
I did. I did indeed.
Am I the only one here who resisted the Curse City?
I think so, yeah.
By the sounds of it. I've been reading like the storyline quest book and it's quite good.
I'm looking forward to painting them. I've assembled all of mine, and the models look great. I'm looking forward to getting my contrast out and doing. Well, there's a lot of them in there for the zombies and the skeletons, but I can't wait to get them all done and play some games when we're allowed.
Yeah, man, I can't wait for that either. To be fair, is it 4 or 5 players?
4, I think.
Yeah, it's up to 4.
Caps out at 4, so there's no like dungeon master system to it.
We take turns being like dungeon master kind of thing. You kind of roll dice.
Does that theoretically mean that there could be a 5th player?
Yeah, I guess theoretically, without just going off the basis of Blackstone Fortress and sort of Silver Tower kind of thing, you could have a 5th person just doing the baddies.
Yeah, it seems logical, doesn't it? I don't know. It feels like, I don't know, it always feels like those kind of games that you need a dungeon master type role, but I guess if they've done a good job of divvying it out amongst the players, then is what it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it could work well if there's someone who's the dungeon master, because then there's someone who's dedicated to just being aware of what's on the map,
and you don't have to have that moment of guilt when you roll really hot for the enemies, because that inevitably always happens to one guy, doesn't it? It's like, oh no, so and so's in charge of the monster rolls again. It's all going terribly wrong. But there you go. But yes, so this show, we mostly talked about stratagems, did a bit of quizzing, and we did put out some general feelers out into the world to see what, fans of the show wanted us to talk about in the future. So Phil will tell us about that, and we'll try and address those points if we can. So are there any questions or feedback that we need to get to this week, Phil?
Yeah, we got quite a few, 6 or 7 kind of community comments. I think a lot of them are just people giving their opinion. I think there are a couple of questions in there as well, so I'll try and go through them all. The first one we got is JP_WH40K on Instagram. This is in relation to stratagems and is very similar to an idea that we had during the podcast. He said, I think you should select maybe 6 stratagems from your pack when you create your list and limit it to 1 strat use on a single unit per phase to avoid OP stacking. It's similar to the idea that we had, where we were like, select a bunch of stratagems at the beginning as part of your army list creation, and that's what you've got.
Yeah. I do like the idea of, obviously I like the idea of picking stratagems that you have access to. I think that is a vital mechanic to streamline gameplay. But the idea of not being able to stack stratagems on units is really interesting. I don't know whether or not that could be linked to certain types of abilities. So maybe if it was that you attributed a keyword to the stratagem that made it a defensive or attack or leadership buff, and maybe you couldn't put 2 leadership or 2 defense or 2 attack buffs on. So maybe something like that could be interesting. But I don't know. I'm torn. I don't know. Rich, what do you reckon about stacking stratagems? Do you feel like it's a problem?
I feel it'd be an interesting tweak to make that if you couldn't stack, because so often you can, and I'm just guilty of this of myself at times, of like just taking a couple of stratagems and double layering them up onto one unit to either make them super like unkillable or make them just unleash a ridiculous amount of damage that they probably weren't normally going to, but because of that particular combination you've been able to achieve. I think it could be interesting.
It definitely like eliminates a lot of the hidden combos that the games developers didn't think about when they wrote those stratagems, that sometimes fall through the cracks when it comes to playtesting, because suddenly someone's found a really devastating combo of stratagems. So if you just take that out of the game, each single stratagem, you kind of know what it's going to do, and you can kind of playtest it properly to balance those stratagems.
I mean, I was a big fan of, in the 8th edition system where soup army lists were more encouraged, I was a big fan of the notion that you could only have stratagems that related to your selected warlord, i.e. if your warlord was a guardsman, the stratagems you unlocked were the guardsman stratagems, and that's all you could have. This, in some respects, achieves a similar kind of result, which is, as you say, Phil, removing those mad combos or removing those unexpected things where multiple books layer up on each other. Because obviously in the case of the Space Marines, especially when you start to look at some of the older supplements, it gets really interesting with the sorts of stratagem combos that you can do. So yeah, I don't hate it. And I actually think it's quite streamlined, right? Like, it's easy. 1 stratagem per unit, per phase. Done.
Less bookkeeping. I'm all for less bookkeeping.
Oh, totally, man. Totally. Cool, man. Nice question from _WH_40. Was it JD? I can't remember now.
JP_WH40K.
JP.
So like Warhammer 40K. So
that's
Mr.
why I
JP.
remembered that bit. I just couldn't remember whether it was JP, KP, or whatever it was. But anyway.
Yeah, the next one's from it's from Dawn's Apothecary, and he's asked us a question about Apothecary. He says, "Be interested in your thoughts about whether you feel the character upgrades for Space Marines, the Chief Apothecary, Master, and including Master Archon. So there's not just Space Marines in here. Are they better as point upgrades, or do you feel they should have been left as command point investments?"
Definitely better as point upgrades, in my opinion. I don't think in certain instances there are enough points, but then in other instances they are. I think the Apothecary is one that really stands out, noting that you obviously need to spend a CP on it as well to unlock its full potential, because you're going to want to give it that warlord trait. And in a lot of instances with the Space Marine stuff anyway, because of the fact that you want those warlord traits, it costs both points and CPs, because the warlord traits are where the powers really start coming into effect, or the abilities of that unit come into effect. So yeah, I mean, I guess in the way it is currently, it costs both realistically, unless of course you are genuinely happy to pay the points and don't want to spend the CP, but spend the CP during the game as you need to, in certain instances anyway. I think for the Master Librarian, or the is it Master Librarian, whatever the terminology was for the Chief Librarian, that's the wording, their warlord trait is like +1 to their psychic phases or psychic rolls, and that's not a stratagem based thing, that's just a warlord trait thing. Whereas in the case of the Master Apothecary or Chief Apothecary, I think their warlord trait is they make the selfless healer ability cost 0 CP, right? So it's different depending on what you're going to take. What was the other unit he was talking about?
He talked about the Archon.
Oh, the Archon.
To Master Archon.
I mean, you're always going to take the Master Archon upgrade, always, and it should cost more points for what it does, because being able to unlock Trueborn is bananas. but yeah, I mean, Rich, you've had a lot of experience with running your Master of the Forge. Is it worth the points?
It's an interesting question, because I was just going to look up what specifically the Chief Apothecary upgrade gives you, because it gives you the ability to use the combat revitalize for 0 CP, isn't it? The main thing.
Only if you do the Warlord trait, yeah.
Yeah, but it also allows you to do your normal sort of healing ability an extra time, and instead of it being D3 wounds, it's 3 wounds, isn't it?
Yeah,
so it's flat free. Yep.
It's I think it depends on the character upgrade, because for the Tech Marine, I don't think it. When I'm running my list at the minute, I take a Primaris Tech Marine with me to heal all my dreadnoughts, and at the minute, I think because since the points changes a couple of months back, I've not taken him as a Master of the Forge because I couldn't afford it. I'm trying to get those extra points somewhere, because as much as it's great to have a guaranteed 3 wounds healed on a unit, I can still roll for that, or I've got ways to get a reroll to that to improve that chance. Whereas that's 20 points, which I can use on more upgrades for weapons in the unit. So on the Tech Marine, I think it's good. I don't think it's necessary. I think you can get away with it more. I'm kind of on the fence.
Would you be more likely to use it by default if it wasn't 20 points but 1 CP?
Oh yeah, absolutely. If it's CP, I'd absolutely take it.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't have then. I don't think the points is as good a trade off as for the CP. But I do like that it's on the points though, because it's a more, you have to make this decision, and it's crafting your army in a more specific way.
I mean, Tim, for your Death Guard stuff, you technically do have to pay CP to upgrade your apothecary equivalent, right? Because basically, to make it a decent apothecary, you need to shower it in upgrades and relics, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
And that is more or less always unlocked with CP, right? Not points.
Yeah, because it comes the relics are unlocked via the CP, because it's like a stratagem that you pay for to give stuff an extra relic. So yeah,
and you pretty much take that as a default because of the fact that because that's how you make that particular unit super efficient, right?
Yeah. If I was going to be taking apothecaries, then that's something I would do by default, just to get my bang for the buck.
And I think that pretty much answers the question why I think the point system is the best way of doing it, because it becomes a more difficult decision to spend the points than it does to spend the CP. Spending the CP is a no-brainer. Spending points matters. So, yeah.
Yeah, because quite often the upgrades that you're doing sometimes reduce the amount of CP that you're doing on something. So it's like you're spending 1 CP to save 2 or 3 CP in the game. It is a no-brainer. But the points of a resource that is taking away from other things, as Richard says, from your weapon upgrades, or for squeezing an extra character or a unit, depending on your army.
And that's the thing, isn't it? It's mad how much of a difference 20 points makes to list creation. But when you are trying to squeeze out the maximum optimization in an army list, 20 points is a vast quantity at the when you're at the kind of the final moments of trying to squeeze everything into your list. But anyway, there we go. Good question. I enjoyed that one. Phil, what's our next one, buddy?
The next one is Capable Bob. He
Capable
says,
Bob.
I like stratagems as long as they aren't too powerful or overpowered. Knowing how and when to use a stratagem adds an element of player agency to the game. A good general can use these ploys to affect the game, which I like. Although saying that, the outcome of a game should not hinge on the use of a single stratagem. In my opinion, stratagems should be used to influence the game in a minor way. Then for my question, I would like to ask, over the course of 8th and 9th edition, what do you think is the most broken stratagem before it was FAQ'd?
I mean, Phil, you may as well answer first, mate.
Ooh, trying to think off the top of my head, I imagine most people would say Vex, the original version, even though it was free CP.
I would agree. Agents of Vex was awful. I hated it.
The one I liked most for Guard was Take Cover when you could apply it on tanks. so you get +1 to their save, which I still think they should be able to get because the concept of hold down is a thing. Yeah, those are my
I think for me, the overpowered stratagems were things that really kind of massively changed the game for people and had huge impacts on very important sequences of gameplay. Probably the one that I thought was most powerful that never got FAQ'd or addressed, and actually as time has gone on has been made available to more armies, was the Craftworld Aeldari ability of Phantasm, which was take 3 units and redeploy them. That is always massive. The amount of times I have won games because people don't know that I'm setting them up to redeploy 3 units happens so often. And, you know, it's one of those things where it's so baked into the way the Elder play. But I can tell you for nothing, when I played against an Ultramarines player who went, cool, I'm now going to redeploy 3 units. I'm like, what? Can you do that as well? And it's like, oh, wow, that's really irritating. I sort of felt
you know what it feels like.
I know. I think Phantasm is huge because you can, especially with the way the game works, you can bait people into doing stuff based on an area of, a misguided sense of safety, and then you can completely counter. And I have won games thanks to Phantasm consistently, so I think it's super strong, and it's still very much in the game. So, stuff like that I think is massive.
There's one stratagem. It's no longer in the game, in its original form, which I hated, which was the old Space Marines fight twice stratagem.
Oh.
Which is someone who was often on the receiving end of Smash Captains with all their rerolls and their fight twice thing. That was probably actually more annoying than Agents of Vex.
The thing that really annoyed me about the fight twice stratagem more than anything else was the fact that so many people didn't clock that it specifically says at the end of the fight phase, fight again. The amount of times where a Smash Captain would smash through something, get into base contact with another thing, and then fight again. It's like, no. You need to give me the chance to punch you back first. You need to see if you survive this. Now, obviously, it was usually charging into tanks and things that couldn't do anything to it anyway, but it is an important nuance with the way that rule worked. But anyway, it's not here anymore. So
wasn't there a particular stratagem around the Siegebreaker cohort that Richard was famous for using? I don't know if the stratagem unlocked it or if
I missed it.
The Centurions needed a stratagem, because what did it do?
The Siegebreaker cohort was an old detachment from one of the Vigilus books. I think it was the first one. But but it gave you access to a stratagem that meant when a unit in the Siegebreaker cohort shoots at a vehicle, every 6 to wound does a mortal wound on top of any other damage, which meant that you could take a unit, which was amazing. In practice, it's a bit like Eradicators today, and on paper it's better than it actually is in practice. But it was so much. It gave them great utility to have this squad filled with storm bolters and heavy bolters that could wipe out infantry and wipe out vehicles, depending on what you wanted to shoot at. I know Orc players hated me for a fact with that, but that wasn't because of the Siegebreaker cohort.
That's just because of you.
That's just because they don't like that many bolt guns. But I do miss that stratagem because it was quite fun being able to have that, to being able to take out a knight or something with them. But sadly, it doesn't have it. It's gone. Sadly.
Yeah. I think all the most powerful and irritating stratagems are ones that do things that massively expose your enemies and produce negative vibes. That's always where I go with it. It's about obviously giving players something that's powerful and thematic, but something that is universally fun and doesn't make the experience negative for your opponents. And stuff like Phantasm did that in spades, as did Vect, as did, I don't know, like stratagems that, like, I'm going to declare a charge on you. Cool, I'm going to move. What? Which is a really well-known one for the Mechanicus, for their new dog pony men. If you declare a charge on them, they can just make a normal move. And it's like, oh, okay. I was banking everything on charging that unit this turn. It's like, yeah, I know. That's why I put them out there. And now they're not here anymore. And it's like, I'm now going to get eradicated, aren't I? Yes. You are. So anyway, Yeah, that kind of stuff. What's next, Phil?
So we've got Archon John, who is
Archon John.
Archon John. He says, I like a stratagem to be an enhancement and not a game changer. Good stratagems give a boost at just the right point in the game and reward good generalship. Bad stratagems become must play and their impact becomes OP, predictable, and boring. For example, I was delighted with the recent changes to Agents of Vex. Stratagem should reward good strategy and not just be an economy of broken buffs.
Totally agree. I think that's pretty much exactly what we said during the course of the pod, right?
Oh, I believe so, yeah. And we did even call out Agents of Vex. So, yeah.
We should get Archon John on the show, really, Phil. He seemingly can do what we do in a more succinct fashion.
Well, we don't want him to take our jobs, so we can't have that.
No, that's it. We need this. We need this. I got 5 kids to feed. Going back to that.
You guys get paid for this?
Yeah, exactly right. Maybe Phil is, but not me.
None of us is getting paid for this.
No.
While I sport my McVie antivirus T-shirt branded sponsored person, yeah. Or was it something like Norton VPN? That's another good one.
Oh, your NordVPN ads,
NordVPN, yeah.
That's what you've been slipping in every now and again.
I know.
Let's have another 5-minute conversation about NordVPN, Dan. Why do we keep talking about this?
well, the checks keep coming in, so you've got to bring it up.
So if you just mention one of these companies, they'll send you more stuff, like all the podcasts.
Oh yeah, that's how it works.
Okay, can we mention Butcher? Can we mention Butcher Box? Because I really want that. Is that how it works?
I've never even heard of that. I don't know. We'll find out, won't we? When you receive that Butcher Box.
Just say names like Ferrari.
Manscaping.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Right, I'll move on to the next.
Shadow Legends.
Shut up. I'll move on to the next one. So this is from Senpai_McElroy. He says, used to hate them as they felt like a gotcha moment in gaming, which led to the feel bads. But now Games Workshop has moved away from that style of strategy, so they're actually rather fun.
Have they?
I still feel like there's a lot of gotcha moments in there.
I feel like it's more gotcha than it's ever been.
Do you think in the new codexes there's particular gotcha moments?
Yeah.
Yes.
I feel unless you do your revision on how each army plays and watch battle reps and stuff, you'll get caught out on what they do. For example, let's take Dark Angels. If you're a new player to the game and you go to a tournament and you face off against Dark Angels, you'd be like, oh, cool, Space Marines know what Space Marines do. And then you just realise that it's like Terminators and they just obliterate you. And you're like, cool.
But what about their stratagems were doing that? Was it the fact that they could advance and charge, or the fact that they can have invuln saves, or the fact that they can, I don't know,
all of the above,
be -1 to wound, or whatever else they've got in their stratagems? Their stratagems are bonkers. They got so much good stuff.
Yeah, all of the above.
Yeah, it's mad, man. I think that's the thing. I like the stratagem system, but it is that thing where it's like you just have to get used to the fact that it is clearly intended to be a gotcha system. That is what it is supposed to be, because it can't function any other way.
Unless you can memorize everybody else's stratagems, then
good luck.
Yeah.
It's important to memorize the standard phrase. I use it in almost every game I play, which is, does you have anything that can advance and charge? Because it's just one of those things that's good to know. It's like, okay, I can see everything over there, I can gauge distances in my head, but is there anything that's going to be, especially when I'm playing something like Space Marine bikes, it's like, how far, or any kind of bikes, Eldar bikes are the worst. It's like, how far can they move and can they still charge? Because then that kind of stuff affects how you move, and it's
and how you deploy.
And there's nothing worse than accidentally leaving yourself open because you didn't realize that, oh yeah, that thing can move 60 inches. Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's definitely lots of kind of good questions to know to ask your opponent about the threat ranges of their ranged weapons or their movement and charging. That's just generally good to ask them as you're playing the game or setting up or deploying your units, which can really sort of help.
Does your opponent have to tell you though?
No, but you'd have to be some kind of. You'd really. I mean, that would be bad, wouldn't it? Like if someone said to me,
"That'd be bad sportsmanship."
Yeah, can you tell me the threat ranges of your shining spears? No, mate. Look it up. It's like, come on now. Are you ever going to say that?
Do your
Admittedly, though, if you turned around to them and said 16, and you were specifically running them as Sam Han, and you didn't mention the fact that you have a Sam Han stratagem to advance and charge, which actually increases your threat range to 22 with a charge, then, so 22 plus 2d6 that you can re-roll because Sam Han, then yeah, maybe that is potentially something you can withhold. But I think
no.
realistically, you should tell someone that you have the ability to advance and charge.
Nice try, cheaty elder player.
I know, but look, you can clearly tell throughout this process, I've been in favor of being transparent about that stuff. I'm just telling you that there's so much in it. Like, how are you supposed to remember all those things?
I think one thing I think is very good though is the like kind of negative feeling, the anti-fun elements, most typified by the old agents effect, which is where you'd use your stratagem, do your cool thing, and then they say, "Nah, you're not allowed to do that thing." I think I'm glad that's changed because it's made it so you're not denying someone else their cool thing. And as long as every army has their cool things and their tricks they can all do, that's great. But when someone has something which specifically stops someone having some fun, I'm glad Vec changed.
Agreed.
Sure.
Agreed.
We got a couple more over on the Facebooks. So this one's from Sean. He says, "I'm a noob player. It'd be great for there to be." It would be great for there to be a good entry-level explanation of how they work, maybe in the Codex, a battle report with your faction, with some of them being used to show their effectiveness. Also, give me a cheat sheet with a quick reference guides to them so I can refer to them without flicking through pages or scrolling. Now, the second point is something we talked about on the episode, because I was saying the layout of the stratagems is still pretty awful in the book, and that needs to be kind of clarified, I think.
I can feel this pain on this, and I actually made a point of writing out all the stratagems that I was most likely to use on like Google Docs for when we played on TTS, and I actually broke them into each phase of when they could be used, and that was my cheat sheet. So every time I was in like the movement phase, I'd have a quick look, and I'll be like, right, I can play this strat, and this strat, and then etc. for like the shooting phase or like the combat phase and everything like that. I find that helps, but I feel like that should be something GW should do, really.
Yeah, I mean, they did. I think at the beginning of 9th edition, they put out some videos which were like a basic how to play the game. So I'm sure they would have done some general explanation of stratagems. I think it's one of those things that as you play the game, you kind of get a hang of. And yeah, watching any kind of battle report, I think you'll get, especially one that's to do with your faction, you'll suddenly see how people use particular combos. But ultimately, you kind of need to develop your own style of playing the game and find out and discover what stratagems you like to use with your units. And as Tim said, to just read through them all, to put a sticky label on the ones you like or cover up the ones you don't. That's what I've done. And sort of just narrow down to a smaller list. So you're not worrying about 20 stratagems, you're worrying about, 5 or 10.
I agree. It does come with experience of playing the army. It's pretty hard as a new player, though, when you're watching a battle report. Or let's say, actually, here's a question. Do you actually sit down and watch a battle report, or is it something you have on the side? Because 9 times out of 10, it's something you have on the side, well, it is for me, while I'm doing something else, I feel. And so all you hear is like this background stuff going on. You don't really hear strats being played. You hear like the crazy moments where it's like, oh, I just rolled like 10 sixes and I needed like 10 sixes to go blow up your knight kind of thing. You're like, oh, that's cool. And it's like the little nuances sort of just go over your head as a way as you're like painting a model or something.
I think the answer is it depends on the person, right, Tim? Like if you are actually sat there watching battle reports, then sure. But if you're doing what you're doing, which is using them as background noise, then yeah, you're going to miss out on those details. But the thing is with all of it, with stratagems, I'm still adamant that that we should assign stratagems to their own phase. I think it is the most logical way of approaching them to make them more user friendly. But irrespective of that, I think like the stratagem system is strange because it's essentially a layer upon a layer which resides between multiple additional layers, especially with 9th edition and its actions, secondaries, chapter tactics, or army equivalent, doctrine or army equivalent. I mean, crikey, playing Necrons at the moment is an exercise in. I mean, it's like doing like the memory quizzes from the old Crimson Factor, because you've got to remember what sequence of like protocols you're going to play out in, and you've got to kind of lay that out from the start. Then you've got to think about what actions you're going to perform, what secondaries you're doing, what stratagem options you have on top of that. It's a hell of a layer cake at the moment. Old 9th edition. There's a lot to running an army these days. So I do understand how it can be really daunting. And I do feel like it is something that GW needs to address, because one of the reasons why I think 8th edition was so successful was it demystified the game. It made it easy for people to approach. But I actually think now it's gotten the most complicated it's ever been, in my opinion.
It is getting more convoluted again. But...
Yeah.
And maybe that the idea from the earlier questions is a good one, of just having less stratagems that you can you pick like a handful that you're allowed to use. And I think that's definitely a good way to start. Just know the ones you want to use, and they're going to be most relevant to you. Because when I started playing some Sisters of Battle games, I got some cheat sheet online, which is basically like a massive book by the end of it. If you look through all the pages of just telling you what phase you're in or what things happening, what stratagems you could use, and it just becomes a bit complicated. And once you've played enough games, you kind of get into your rhythm of what the army can do and what tricks you can do. But yeah, for new, it's when you're starting out, it can be overwhelming just knowing all these different stratagems that you could use.
Yeah, I'm doing that at the moment with my Space Marines. So I'm looking through that codex, and it's like, there's just so many. And it's like I've memorized 2 so far, if that. And it's I just have to go through it and pick the ones that I think I'm going to use on a regular basis, jot that down somewhere, and give it a go.
Transhuman physiology. There you go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Standard.
That one where you shoot twice. Done.
Yeah.
Turn a dreadnought into a captain.
They seem to be standout ones.
Yeah. Have we got one last one, Phil? Or is
we do. We got one last one. This is David. He says, Are any of the expensive stratagems, such as Far on My Position for the Astra Militarum, Execution, Bombardment for the Inquisition, and Consrucation, Course Uscration, I don't know if it's either spelt wrong or I can't pronounce it, Corsication Beam for the Thousand Suns, and so on, are they ever worth paying the 3 or 4 CP?
Sometimes, yeah. There's the 3 CP Captain Eradication Beam, or whatever it's called, the Orbital Bombardment. That's the words. I really like that in the context of 9th edition, because what they've changed it to is an area of threat. So they go, cool, put down a marker at the start of your next turn, this triggers. And I love that. I love that weird kind of idea of, cool, this is going down, and I have put this in a place where I've essentially, laid out to my opponent that this is going to happen in the preceding turn. So you need to react to this situation. You need to flee from that area if you don't want to take the damage, or you have to sit there and accept that you're about to take a bucket load of mortal wounds. So yeah, I think in that case, that's certainly worth it. In other instances, I think like they've always consistently been worth it. But again, it's rare that you use them, because the reality of the situation is that a free CP strat on average probably isn't as worthwhile as free 1 CP strats. So I think there is a bit of a scaling issue there. But I think the problem is with the free CP strats is if you made them 2 CP, everyone would be doing them all the time.
Well, you just make it one-off, wouldn't you? Like once per game.
Yeah.
Ability. I think the problem with the older versions of it is they do mortal wounds, but normally on like a 4 or a 5 up. So there's the bombardment one from Guard, which hits every unit, and only on like a 6, I think it goes off. So you spend 3 CP, you'll do maybe 2 or 3 mortal wounds across someone's entire army. And then I've done another one, which I don't think it was the Inquisition one, but it might have been, where it was like an area effect. And I managed to do it and get like an entire Tau army in that thing. But again, it's like, it was either like a 4-up or a 5-up maybe on each unit. And I should have had quite a devastating round of mortal wounds, but because of my dice rolling, I managed to kill like 1 or 2 Tau Pathfinders, and I was like, that was a complete waste of CP. So I think basically they're not worth it in the original sort of format. The new version, if they're more like the Space Marine one, because that one goes off on a 2+, does D3 mortal wounds. If you roll a 6, it does. Is it just flat 3 or is it D6?
I think it goes the orbital bombard now is quite a different rule altogether.
Yeah, but in terms of it's still the models that are affected in that area of effect of 6-inch range. I think you still got to hit them on a 2-up, and then on a 6-up it does more wounds.
Here it is. I've got to sign it again. Don't worry. Yeah, I think you are right. I think, but it is quite a. But I think the thing that gives it the edge is the fact that it lays out a threat, and I think the threat is more powerful than the actual attack itself, because the threat creates a response, right? And you can leverage that response and do things with it. So, for example, you could use it as a way of, kiting your enemy into an area where they don't want to be. And again, it's that kind of pressure, that kind of sense of danger that forces your opponent to make mistakes. And that's what I like about that stratagem, is it's basically saying you need to respond to this. This is a problem that won't go away. You have to come up with a solution.
It's dangerous enough that you can't just ignore it. So I've got it up here. Basically, you roll a d6 for each unit within 6 inches, adding 1 if they're within 3 inches of the center. Basically, on a roll of 1, nothing happens. On a 2 to 5, they suffer D3 mortal wounds. On a 6, they suffer D6 mortal wounds. Which, if they're within that 3-inch bit, that's going to be on a 5-up. So that's super scary. So at the very least, you'd move them out of that range, and maybe you'd shrug a couple of D3 mortal wounds on your units. But ultimately, you would try and move out of that range if you can.
But again, that's a 12-inch bubble, and that's massive, right? So. Yeah, that's that's 12 inches across, as it were. So it's big. That's a real threat. That's what I like about that.
I've always been usually disappointed, like Phil's dice rolls, with the big expensive CP offensive stratagems. However, if we're talking about just expensive stratagems in general, as a Imperial Knights Tyrannus player, I've always keeping at least 3 CP left of me at all times for stratagems like our Darkest Hour to bring a knight back. So the kind of the bring back to life stuff, or even with Space Marine characters like that fight on Death one, I think it's 2 CP now. Those kind of ones, the ones that kind of help that you come back to any kind of bring back to life strat on 3 CP is my experience is it's usually worth it. When it doesn't work, obviously it's not worth it, but when it does, it's.
I mean, how much is the Green Tide one for orcs to bring a unit back?
2.
Yeah, that's
2 CP.
That's well worth it.
Yeah, but you can only do it once per game, and you can only do it. Oh no! It's the mob up thing that you can now only do on boys squads. You can do the Green Tide on anything, I think, but it's only once per game. So it's not too bad, but you have to take them off the board and then bring them on a table edge. I think they don't deep strike; they come in from a table edge, which isn't always exactly what you want it to be, but maybe it is. I don't know. It is good though. It is really good. All right, cool. Well, there we go. Thank you, gentlemen, for contributing to that outro there. We essentially added another stratagem segment to the end of the show, but a little bit of extra insight and extra fun stuff, so that was good. But yeah, thanks, lads. Look forward to having you back on. Phil, what are we going to be talking about next week? Do we even know?
Well, we did a shout out on the old Instas to get people's feedback, so we've had lots of input on that. A few people wanted us to talk about White Dwarf then and now. Quite a few people actually suggested we talk about the flashpoints from White Dwarf and have said it's actually really good. So Dan, I might force you to talk about that. Alternatively, the other option is we talk about Armies of Renown from Book of Rust.
Well, that'd be pretty cool. Whatever the case, we'll find out what it is next week. But until then, goodbye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I know what you're thinking. What happened to Tim's audio during the quiz? Well, essentially, it got corrupted for the first part, and then, out of desperation, I replaced the sound of his voice with the teacher from Snoopy. And then, fortunately, once we got into the quiz, he was mostly there, so it didn't seem like something we needed to go back and re-record. So hopefully that wasn't too jarring for you.